Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan, and welcome back to my channel or channels. Today, we are continuing with the reading of Remnants of Filth, Volume 3, also known as Rou by Rou Bao or just Meat Bun. And today is going to be a longer video. I don't know how many chapters I'm going to read just yet. I know I'll be reading this morning, later in the day, and probably tomorrow morning as well before publishing the video. So all I can tell you is we're starting at chapter 77. So enjoy. Chapter 77 Burgeoning Passion. The walnut ship soared through the cloud-dappled sky. The pleasure boat kept pace, but at a healthy distance. It was clear that Mu Zhongchui was so averse to Jiang Yeshui that he wasn't even willing to fly alongside him. At dusk, the sun sank into the depths of the cloud sea, its brilliance lapping against the oars like the world's great river. Mang had never seen such a sight and leaned over the ship's railing so as to not miss a moment. Reflected within those rain-washed blue eyes were the golden hues of even tide and the vast and distant lands below. He was thoroughly engrossed in the view when something suddenly jabbed at his shin, twice. Mang turned. At first, he saw no one. But after lowering his gaze, he saw that the culprit was an enchanted ceramic servant that could move under its own power. This servant was painted crudely, with uneven eyes and its nose and mouth squished together. Mang found it incredibly funny and laughed out loud. Who made this? It's so ugly. The bamboo curtain in the cabin rose and fell. Jiang Yeshui emerged, clad in cream robes, the shade of lotus root, and seated in the wooden wheelchair powered by spiritual energy. He said to Mang, "You made it." Mang was speechless. At his shock and bewilderment, Jiang Yeshui laughed. "It was a long time ago, when you were still in the army. You saw me making clay figurines, and of course you had to make one too. But you didn't have much patience back then. You always did things impulsively, starting off strong but losing steam toward the end. You sculpted half of it with me before you lost interest and half-heartedly drew on a face." So that's what happened. Mang sized up the ugly ceramic servant. When he considered how it had come from his own hands, he felt a little queer. The pottery figure bore signs of age, and some of its lacquer had already lost its color. It walked in circles around Mang, its crooked mouth opening and closing as it recited clumsily, "Eat, eat." Mang reached deep into his sleeves and then said helplessly, "I didn't bring anything to eat. Also, you're made of clay. Why do you want to eat?" The ugly ceramic figure repeated stubbornly, "Eat, eat." Mang thought that its obstinate expression, with its brows all scrunched up, was actually quite similar to Morsi's at times. But he had to keep such thoughts to himself. If anyone found out, whether it was the venerated Morsi himself or the droves of girls in Chonghua obsessed with Shizun, Mang would land himself in no end of trouble. He tried to shoo the figurine away. "There's nothing for you to eat. You can go." The ugly clay servant reached out a tiny hand to tug on Mang's sleeve. "Eat, eat." "It's not asking you for food," Jiang Yeshui said with a smile. "It wants you to go into the cabin to eat." Mang had thought they would have to subsist on rations over this long journey and hadn't expected a sit-down meal. Curious, he asked, "Did you make the food?" "No." "Then forget it." Mang shook his head like a rattledrum. "Whatever Shihujun makes is completely inedible." "I've equipped this walnut ship with a couple of little enchanted clay figurines like this one," Jiang Yeshui explained. "They did all the cooking. Just some simple dishes, but—" He paused and smiled. "It'll still be better than what Shihujun makes." That brought Mang a measure of relief. He turned to look at the pleasure boat sailing off in the distance. "We aren't asking Little Dragon, asking Mu Zhongxianxiang to come eat?" "Xiaozhu won't come." Jiang Yeshui's expression dimmed, appearing gloomy and indistinct in the light of the setting sun. With a twitch of his fingertips, the wooden wheelchair turned and rolled toward the ship's cabin. "Let's go." Within, two small clay people were busily arranging dishes and pouring tea. They were much more pleasant to look at than the one Gumang had made. Their noses were noses. Their eyes were indeed eyes. One was a man and one was a woman, both very endearing. Although the dishes on the table weren't sophisticated fare, they were refreshing and tasty, and the tea was clear and sweet. Gumang didn't like to drink tea, so Jiang Yeshui had warmed a jar of wine for him. "Don't drink too much," Morsi said. Jiang Yeshui replied fondly. "This is fragrant snow wine. It's not easy to get drunk on. If he likes it, let him do as he wants." Gumang licked his lips, grinning artlessly. As the moist tip of his tongue darted out between his teeth, Morsi swept a disapproving glance over it. "Qingshi Elder, he's a criminal. Why bother treating him with the same courtesy as before?" Despite his words, Morsi still let Gumang have his way. It was indeed difficult to get drunk off of fragrant snow wine, but in the end, it was still wine. Gumang found its mild sweetness very much to his liking and ended up having a few cups too many. The food the little clay servants had prepared also contained some new and exciting flavors, and they were in charge of refilling all the dishes. Intrigued by their ungainly mannerisms as they served the food, Gumang wolfed down 3 more bowls than usual just so he could keep washing them. When they finished dinner, each returned to their individual cabins to rest. Gumang's spiritual energy wasn't considered stable. He had, after all, gone berserk on Mu Zhonglian's watch in recent memory, and they couldn't afford any risks with their walnut ship so high in the sky. Morsi had to monitor him as closely as possible, so he and Gumang were sharing a cabin tonight. "So full," Gumang groaned, holding his belly as he collapsed face first onto his bed. "Get up." Morsi, ever fastidious, hauled Gumang back to his feet. "Go bathe before you sleep." Gumang refused. "I won't." "If you won't bathe, then you can sleep on the deck tonight." Gumang collected his blankets, clearly ready to go sleep on the deck in the wind. Morsi's sharp brows drew together in anger as he dragged Gumang back. "Who said you could leave?" he said severely. "Lie down." Gumang's sleepy eyes were unfocused, their blue irises like a mist-veiled lake. "Can I just not take a bath?" "No." Gumang frowned so intently his brows nearly touched. He slowly curled into a ball. "I really don't want to. I feel so weak. Why don't you help me wash?" "Oh." Morsi had worn a severe expression, but Gumang's response caught him off guard. He froze, and a hint of embarrassment surfaced on his features, instantly undercutting his intimidating aura. "Don't even think about it," he responded after a pause. Gumang sighed and threw himself back onto the bed, sprawling across the blankets. He looked as though he could fall asleep just like this. Morsi's efforts to govern him were apparently fruitless. He was left to head to the washroom alone, where he took a bath and changed into clean clothes. Morsi had assumed Gumang was acting out to avoid the bath, but when he returned, he found Gumang burrowed deep in the blankets, clutching his stomach. His brow was furrowed as he mumbled softly. At this point, there was no need for him to keep up the act. With a small jolt of surprise, Morsi realized he was truly feeling unwell. He dried his damp hair and came to the side of Gumang's bed. "What's wrong?" Long lashes trembling, Gumang opened his eyelids a crack. His clear blue eyes were misty as he glanced weakly at Morsi. "Ate too much," he grumbled. "So full. Stomach hurts." For a while, Morsi was silent. "Deserved," he said succinctly. But still, he sat beside Gumang and gestured with a grim expression. "Roll over here." Gumang hesitated. He generally couldn't afford to anger this person, and he could afford it even less when he was so weak. After all, a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. If he was told to roll, then he would roll. Thus, he turned over twice on the bed, coming to a stop next to Morsi's hand. "Do I need to keep rolling?" "Lie down and don't move," said Morsi. So Gumang lay stiff as a salted fish. His clothes were in disorder, and his gaping lapels exposed an expanse of firm, scarred skin beneath. After a glance, Morsi reached over to pull Gumang's collar closed. Then he moved his hands to Gumang's stomach and slowly began to knead it. Gumang smacked his lips. Are you punishing me for eating too much? What do you think? Morsi said curtly. It wasn't Gumang's cynicism that was to blame, but Morsi's ornery personality. So often did he make life difficult for Gumang that Gumang had figured this somewhat ungentle massage was a new form of torture. This punishment wasn't unbearable. Although the kneading felt kind of strange, the discomfort in his gut really did ease under Morsi's ministrations. Lying on the bed, Gumang heaved a sigh, his vision gradually dimming. Before he dropped off completely, he mumbled, Then, can you punish me a little longer? In his last moments of consciousness, he saw Morsi's face go rigid as he registered these words, his eyes seeming to darken. Gumang's head lolled to the side. Face pressed to Morsi's arm, he fell into a hazy slumber. That night, he dreamed once more, those lost memories glowing faintly. He dreamed of a low tent, wind whistling outside as he breathed in the fragrance of pear blossom white wine as well as Morsi's honeyed scent. The world swam before his eyes. He realized this was the night of Morsi's coming of age, which he'd only half remembered. On that night, he'd brought a porn booklet from an old bookstall, his heart filled with mischief as he gifted it to his Morshudi on the eve of his adulthood. He hadn't realized he was playing with fire until Morsi finally pulled him down onto the bed. The last dream had ended at this point, the memory broken off. He'd always been confused as to what exactly happened next, and why the scenario made him feel parched and uneasy. Perhaps it was due to the wine, and Morsi massaging his aching stomach in his bed, that regular, forceful rhythm recalling another kind of rhythm from his past. Like clouds and mist dispersing, he remembered. On the night of Morsi's coming of age, they'd fallen together into the narrow little army cot. His thoughts were muddled, but he could remember with perfect clarity the passionate look on Morsi's face. His handsome, youthful, self-restrained features were drowned in the mist of love and desire. His eyes dark, usually so cool and controlled, looked slightly bewildered, like a young beast that had fallen into the trap of lust. Youth meant inexperience and impetuousness, meant boundless power straining to break loose. Beastliness meant primal instinct and veracity, limitless desire threatening to spill over. Those eyes stared fixedly and unerringly at Gumang. Clothes fell to the floor like the prying open of a clamshell, revealing trembling flesh beneath and the faint scent of the sea. Gumang's throat bobbed as he swallowed. And now he was faced with the sight of Morsi undressed, which was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. His shoulders were broad, his waist slender yet well-muscled. Back then, Morsi had far fewer scars, especially on his chest. Back then, his chest was perfect and unblemished, clean of the wound Gumang had personally carved into his flesh. In the dancing light and shadow, the bed swayed under the weight of their tangled bodies, emitting a strange chorus of creaks. Gumang remembered how Morsi's motions had first been restrained as he pinned Gumang beneath him. As the night wore on, the younger man's desire went to his head and his thrusts grew faster and harder. Gumang felt as though he had become clay in Morsi's hands as his wine-softened limbs were rearranged, half by his own will and half by Morsi's, into every sort of position as the two of them entwined. He remembered Morsi's alluring lips, slightly parted as he panted, his low gasps as he pressed close to Gumang's ear, his body surging ceaselessly in the murky light. An overwhelming sensation rushed through him. Gumang couldn't help but let out a hoarse moan, just like the one from his memories. Should he? Then, as though he had stepped into thin air, Gumang's eyes flew open. His violent shudders gradually ceased, like the tide receding. He was soaked in sweat and still trembling minutely, panting through glossy lips. Those unfocused blue eyes looked up, right into Morsi's face, which was now tense beneath the candlelight. Chapter 78. No Sense of Shame. What happened to me? Gumang stammered in confusion. He didn't describe his condition in more detail, but Morsi, with a downward flick of his gaze, immediately saw the messy stain on Gumang's underclothes and sank into an uncomfortable silence. Gumang was unsettled by this reaction from his body. I don't feel quite right. Am I sick? You're not, said Morsi. You're not sick. Gumang's face was still flushed from the dream, and his breathing was rapid. He looked down at his own pants in helpless confusion. Then what's going on here? His blue eyes were wide, giving Morsi the impression of a pure and innocent wolf cub. However, this wolf cub's questions were too embarrassing. The old Gumang had once charged up Morsi with an erotic booklet to give him a coming-of-age lesson, but Morsi was too thin-skinned. No matter the circumstances, he could never do anything of the sort. You're just having a normal reaction, Morsi replied. It was only a dream, that's all. Gumang quickly nodded. It was just a dream. I dreamed of the night you came of age again. We, were sleeping together, and then we did some very strange things. You looked like you really liked it. Okay. You looked like you really liked it. You seemed very happy. Morsi was... 1 second. Morsi was especially adept at dealing out torment in bed. Without fail, he pushed Gumang until he was choking back sobs, his body limp and his lips moving in pleas for mercy. Yet it was difficult for Morsi to say anything lewd if he wasn't pushed to the limit. Conversely, Gumang had always spouted the most mortifying things during their wildest entanglements, though whether he was trying to provoke Morsi or simply couldn't shut up was anyone's guess. Those words added fuel to an already raging fire, goading the youthful Morsi until he couldn't suppress his fervor. The world became firewood and flames, and the man in his arms the only source of water. He plunged repeatedly into the depths of this sweet spring, seeking to dampen the scalding heat in his heart. Gumang blinked, his eyes watery and bewildered. So you liked doing those things to me, right? Morsi wanted to say no, but before the word could leave his lips, Gumang continued pensively. I think I liked it. It felt really good. He looked up, his face still tinged with the flush brought on by those memories. It seemed like you needed me. Morsi immediately stilled. It's good to be needed by someone, Gumang said softly. For someone to get happiness from me, not because of hatred or venting. That felt so good. Oh my God. Do you know what you're talking about? Morsi asked. How I felt back then, Gumang replied sincerely. I'm talking about how I felt back then, on the night you came of age. I've remembered everything now. Some of those feelings I don't understand and can't describe, but the others, I know I really liked them. Morsi felt as if he'd been dealt a heavy blow to the heart. Ever since Gumang defected, Morsi had wondered what Gumang had felt toward him. He often thought that Gumang had been half-heartedly placating him, dealing with him, toying with him, or perhaps that he had been pestered into doing what Morsi wanted. When the word liked entered his ears after 7 long years, he suddenly didn't know how to react. I've been living with you this whole time, without ever helping you out and always making you mad. Why didn't you tell me I could make you happy like that? Well, Gumang. Morsi jumped to his feet like a cat whose tail had been trod on. Swallowing hard, he glared through red-rimmed eyes. Who said I liked you? Stop imagining things. Gumang's eyes widened in puzzlement. But you were clearly... That was just a dream. Seems to me like you've had too much medicine. You can't even tell dreams from reality. Gumang wanted to speak, but he didn't know what to say. His tense, upright posture sagged slightly. He seemed disheartened. yet also unconvinced. After a moment's downcast thought, he suddenly stood and captured Morsi's lips with his own, pressing their mouths together. Morsi's ears buzzed. All the blood in his body rushed toward his brain. For a split second, the world flashed white. It was just like the past, like the days Morsi remembered in his dreams. Gumang looping his arms around his neck, pulling him down, his tongue pressing in between his teeth, lingering and tangling, making soft, wet sounds. Gumang felt a sudden sharp pain at the tip of his tongue. Morsi was shoving him away. You... Morsi panted, his lips, usually cold and colorless, flushed red by their passion, making for a singularly arresting sight. But this beauty's brows were drawn tight in fury, glaring daggers that pierced clean through Gumang. Morsi was so angry he couldn't speak. Only after a long while did he yank at his lapels, which Gumang had pulled into disarray, drawing them closed. You really have no sense of shame, he snarled. Gumang rubbed at his lips. Morsi had bitten him so viciously that he had drawn blood, like an anxious beast trapped in a dead end. But there was something Gumang had finally confirmed. You're lying to me. Morsi was silent. That wasn't a dream. It was real. Gumang swept a glance over the lower half of Morsi's body. Just a moment ago, I felt you against me. Morsi could muster no response. At last, he flung aside the door curtain and strode out of the room, his expression black as pitch. When Gumang hurried after him, Morsi turned and furiously jabbed a finger at his chest. Stay where you are. Tell anyone about what happened tonight, and I'll send you back to Luomei Pavilion the minute we return. Where are you going? Gumang asked. None of your business. But aren't you sleeping with me? Listen up, asshole. Morsi bit out through gritted teeth. A gentleman knows what to do and what not to do. I will excuse your inappropriate action today because I know your mind isn't clear. But I've told you now, so if you still dare... Morsi choked on his words for a moment. This gentleman couldn't bring himself to describe Gumang's scoundrel behavior. He snapped. If you still dare to do anything like that again and seduce me, I'll see that you pay for it. His tone was fierce, but when paired with the parting of those French-kissed, suggestively pinkened lips, he inevitably became less imposing. Not only did his threats fail to quell Gumang, they conjured up the image of the Morshudi who had flown into an embarrassed rage at Gumang's teasing all those years ago. Even if many of the details from back then still eluded him, this feeling was like an unsealed jug of fine wine, suffusing the air with its rich scent. Gumang lowered his head and couldn't hold back a puff of laughter, just like in the past. It would have been all right if he hadn't laughed. Now, Morsi's expression immediately grew darker, and his knuckles cracked as he clenched his fists. But although Gumang had recovered some of his memories, he at least wasn't quite so much of a troublemaker as he had been. That burst of laughter was pure reflex. Upon seeing that Morsi was upset, he restrained his amusement and obediently knelt on the bed. I'm sorry, he said earnestly. If you don't like it, then I won't do it again. Please don't send me back to Luomei Pavilion. Only then did Morsi leave the cabin, anger still etched in every line of his face. Out on the deck, he bumped into Jiang Yeshui in the wooden wheelchair. He looked up at Morsi in astonishment. Shizun, who provoked you? Why are you so angry? Morsi pressed his lips into a thin line and said tersely, No one provoked me. What are you here for? Jiang Yeshui smiled. I was on my way to bring you quilts. Do you need any? No. What about Gumang? He's plenty warm. It would be better for him to sleep on bamboo mats. You fought with him again? Asked Jiang Yeshui. Morsi flicked his sleeves angrily. It's his own fault. You two are really... Jiang Yeshui smiled faintly. Long ago, when Gumang was stubborn and mischievous, he loved nothing more than to make you mad. How does he still anger you so, even when he's like this? But, upset or not, you should still give him an extra quilt. His health isn't as good as it used to be, and now he's weak to the cold. If he caught a chill, it would cause even more problems on this journey. You shouldn't bicker too much with him. Morsi fell silent. At length, he reached out to take the quilt Jiang Yeshui offered. Many thanks. When morning came, they found themselves hovering above the Dream Butterfly Islands. Jiang Yeshui took out his compass and silently recited an incantation. The little object gleamed with brilliant light, then pointed toward a small island in the southeastern portion of the archipelago. That island is there, he said. Chapter 79. Chattery Little Pig Monster. That's quite the name. The two ships soared through the cloud cover and descended in tandem. As the black clouds thinned, the earth loomed below. They could now easily make out the details of Bat Island. It wasn't large, and they spotted buildings hidden here and there among its forests. A demon tower stood tall at its center, with lofty eaves and a dazzling golden roof. In the cultivation realm, such towers were often built to suppress demons. Soul-subduing copper bells would hang from their eaves, and the bricks would be painted with talismans and sigils. However, this tower in the middle of Bat Island was not so. It had 7 floors, with human heads hanging where copper bells should have been. Those heads were rotted to the bone, swaying eerily in the island's coppery wind. Jiang Yeshui and Muzhong Chuyi both modulated the flow of their spiritual energy to set the pleasure boat and the walnut ship down directly in front of this central tower. When they had all disembarked, the boats and oars shrank to their original size and were stowed in Tiankun pouches. The tower and its surroundings were dark and silent before them. Upon taking a closer look, they discovered thousands of bats clustered densely under the roof tiles. Because it was midday, these bats were sound asleep. Human sacrifice tower, Jiang Yeshui murmured. What's a human sacrifice tower? Gumag asked. I've only ever heard of demon-suppressing towers. It's a similar concept, Jiang Yeshui explained. People build towers to suppress demons, while demons build towers to trap people. This is a bat demon island, so of course the master of the island is a bat monster rather than a cultivator. This tower was built to imprison human lives in preparation for some future use. What kind of future use? Jiang Yeshui paled. Hard to say, he said softly. Some monsters eat people, so they store them as food. Some monsters drink blood, so they... Jiang Yeshui was still speaking when Muzhong Chuyi strode ahead of the group. Without a moment's hesitation, he flung a paper talisman onto the great doors of the human sacrifice tower. The doors, scarred with the traces of spells, rumbled open. With a wave of his horsetail whisk, Muzhong Chuyi brushed away the miasma that rushed out of the tower. Then he turned, dark brown eyes glancing coldly behind him. Jiang Yeshui, are you here to perform a rescue or give a lecture? Then he strode into the tower without a backward glance. Within seconds, the darkness had swallowed his pure white silhouette. Jiang Yeshui and the others hastened to follow. The great hall on the first floor of the human sacrifice tower was dark and empty aside from 8 strange and imposing stone pillars. They looked to be carved with complex designs, but upon closer examination, it became clear that they were in fact constructed from many individual bones. Thousands upon thousands of bats hung upside down from their surface. These bats were nothing like common bats one might see in the wild. Each was as tall as a person, and their wings weren't dark gray, but a translucent white. Under these layers of white membranes, many of their bodies were visibly humanoid. Some had transformed greatly, while others retained their bestial features. The former were indistinguishable from regular humans, but for their membranous wings, while the latter had only grown human legs, remaining otherwise bat-like. These bat monsters, seemingly in the process of metamorphosis, blanketed the entire tower above them. They numbered several thousand, if not a full 10,000. Afraid to wake them, Gumang asked quietly, Are they asleep? Moshi shook his head. They're cultivating in seclusion. There are ancient records about these monsters. They're fire bats. Gumang had always been pragmatic. He swept a glance over the fire bats hanging from the 7 floors of the tower like braised ducks and asked Morsi a second question. Are they hard to fight? Morsi didn't answer directly. Fire bats come from a half-demon, half-immortal tribe of Jiuhua Mountain known as the Feathered Tribe. They're actual immortals? Gumang sized up these furry monsters with his prominent breastbones. They must be hard to fight, he marveled. These guys really don't look like how I imagined immortals would at all. Muttering to himself, he shot a glance at Muzhong Chuyi, who stood at the head of their party. In his opinion, immortals at least had to look like this man, graceful in gait and elegant in demeanor, as if their robes and ribbons would flutter even in the absence of a breeze. These half-rats, half-human creatures didn't compare in the least. Fortunately, Morsi had more to say, promptly saving Gumang's impression of immortals. Firebats can't be considered half-immortal. Like I said, they're the offspring of the Feathered Tribe. The Feathered Tribe are half-immortal and half-demon. Some of them with stronger demonic traits degenerate and become depraved enough to couple with beasts. The monsters resulting from this union are the firebats you see. Gumang diligently attempted the math on his fingers. So they're half-immortal, half-demon, half-beast? They hardly inherit immortal blood, said Morsi. It would be simpler to say they're half-beast and half-demon. Gumang brought the conversation back to its start. So, are they easy to fight? They're strong in terms of spiritual energy, but they're quite dull-witted, so not very difficult. But this is the gathering place of all fire bat demons. If possible, it'd be better to not engage. Don't go bothering them. He turned back to Jiang Yeshui. Qingshu, can you tell if Zhanxing left any tracks here? Let me try to see, said Jiang Yeshui. He produced a paper talisman from his Qiankun pouch and gently blew on it. The talisman transformed into a spiritual sparrow that danced in the air on swift wings. Seek out Zhanxing's breath. After receiving its order, the sparrow fluttered toward the top of the tower. Just as it reached the 3rd level, it let out a screech. Its wings burst into formless flames, and it vanished in a wisp of gray smoke. 8 large scarlet words materialized in mid-air. Ye of foreign clan, offer sacrifice of blood. Jiang Yeshui frowned. It looks like anything that wishes to ascend the tower, whether it's us or our spiritual butterflies or beasts, must first offer fresh blood. He turned to look at a pool of blood in the center of the demon tower and sank into contemplation. Do we drip blood in it? Let's try and see, said Morsi. The 4 approached the blood pool. Morsi unfastened the dagger hidden in his sleeve and sliced open his palm, then passed the dagger to Jiang Yeshui. After everyone let a few drops of fresh blood fall into the pool, the scarlet within began to surge. Blood splashed, and a hair-raising snarl emanated from the pool. A blazing red beast burst from the depths. What the hell? Gumang exclaimed. Through the blood misting his vision, he saw that the beast had the body of a man, but the face of a boar. Tusks protruded from his snout, which was covered in fiery scarlet fur, and his eyes glowed red as the setting sun. He swung a massive hatchet, flinging off blood from the pool, then sneezed violently. The creature immediately launched into a stream of profanity. The fucking fuck's going on these days? People keep trying to trespass. You so fucking tired of being alive? You're here to be snacks for Her Majesty the Bat Queen? Jiang Yeshui's eyes widened. It's a Shangao. This was a monster well known throughout the 9 provinces. Gumang, however, had lost his memories. He hadn't the slightest clue. The fact that the others clearly understood what was going on made him anxious. Yet he was also embarrassed to ask. What's a Shangao? He whispered to Morsi. An ancient evil beast, Morsi answered. It's red as fire, looks like a pig, and has no interests beyond cursing people out. This pig's interests are quite similar to yours, Gumang thought. If the 2 of you start squabbling, I don't know who will win. Breathing noisily, the Shangao stared through his piggy eyes at each of them in turn, then immediately cursed them out as expected. Lame legs, dead face, blue-eyed monster, and Missy. You 4 bastards have trespassed into Bat Tower and woken me up. You stupid assholes have got some nerve. Gumang assigned each of these insults the second he heard them. Silently, he ticked them off on his fingers. Lame legs would be Jiang Yeshui. Blue-eyed monster is me. Princess and Little Dragon Lady both look like their faces are frozen like that, but Princess is pretty tall and built, so Missy would probably be Muzhong Chuyi, who's half a head shorter than Morsi. So, Morsi is Deadface for sure. What are you doing here? You'd better fess up quick. The creature was an ancient spiritual beast, so Jiang Yeshui made obeisance and said, My younger brother came to the Dream Butterfly Islands a few days back, but there's no sign of him since. The only information we have led us to this Bat Island. This is why we've trespassed into your hallowed territory. Your brother? The Shangao squinted at him. You're a big cripple. So is your brother a little cripple? Jiang Yeshui had a good leash on his temper. His face betrayed nothing. This one's younger brother is healthy and whole. Oh, a non-crippled brat then. I did see one a couple days back. Does he wear white robes with gold trim and chirp and chatter when he talks? Looks like a slacker with a pig's brain. Muzhong Chuyi's and Jiang Yeshui's expressions shifted slightly. Although the Shangao was crude, his description matched Zhanxing to a T. Jiang Yeshui bowed again. Zhanxing, may I ask where this youth is now? It was impressive that Jiang Yeshui could call this pig Zhanxing without blushing. But the Shangao didn't buy it. Damn cripple! Flattery won't get you anywhere. He snorted. You still haven't answered the question I asked. I'll ask you again. Is your brother a chattering slacker with a pig's brain? Jiang Yeshui paused, unwilling to endorse the Shangao's unfavorable description of his brother. As he hesitated, he heard Muzhong Chuyi's icy voice. Correct. Stupid and long-winded, white clothes with gold trim. That's him. Do you know where he is? Huh! Little brat. At least you admit it frankly. The Shangao's beady little eyes turned toward Muzhong Chuyi. Although, you're a grown man, yet you're more like a fairy with a tiny waist and pretty face. That womanish look really makes you so ugly. I asked you where that youth is now. Muzhong Chuyi did not like to wait. He was already running out of patience, clipping each word as he interrogated the pig. The Shangao froze for a second, perhaps caught by Muzhong Chuyi's electrifying gaze and imposing manner. If I answered just because you asked, wouldn't that be a huge embarrassment for me? Muzhong Chuyi narrowed his eyes. What do you want? Of course, everything must go by Master Shangao's rules. Muzhong Chuyi's dark brows drew together in rage. What rules? The Shangao shuffled. That's a long story. First, I'll ask you all a question. Do you know the original purpose of this tower? It's a human sacrifice tower, used to imprison live humans for future use, Jiang Yeshui replied. The cripple is right, but our Dream Butterfly Island have plenty of spiritual energy, and the monsters have gradually learned to cultivate through ErHa. The Bat Queen sincerely wants to ascend as an immortal and has hardly killed any living creatures in the past 100 years. She has no need to capture humans to consume. This tower was gradually abandoned and now has become a haven for bat spirits cultivating in seclusion. In that case, there's no use in keeping my brother on the island, Jiang Yeshui said gently. Is it possible to beg magnanimity for your esteemed ruler and let my brother return with us? Huh! Keep dreaming, lame legs. The Bat Queen doesn't kidnap cultivators, but your pig-brained brother threw himself into our hands and violated Her Majesty's taboo. Let him go. You think it's so easy? What taboo did he violate? Jiang Yeshui asked. The Shangao snickered. Same thing. You ask, but do I have to answer? Everything according to Daddy's rules. Muzhong Chuyi was at the end of his rope. Furious, he snapped his horsetail whisk. He didn't yet intend to strike, but his eyes sparked with rage. Brows drawn low, he snapped. We've already asked for your rules, so why haven't you explained them? The Shangao sneered, his tusks protruding. Missy looks so delicate, but his temper's worse than mine. How spicy. Fine, Daddy will tell you. He paused dramatically. Daddy guards this tower for the Bat Queen and doesn't usually hurt anyone. When you cultivators drop in to ask things, I can choose to be good and answer 3 questions. But if you receive the answer to a question, All must pay a similar price. So, you must think it through. Only 3 questions may be asked, but the cost of an answer can be as low as 1 hair or as high as your 3 ethereal and 7 corporeal souls. How about it? You sure you want to do this? Mu Zhongchuyi didn't even blink. Question 1. Where is your Zhanxing? Oh, that was quick. Asking right off the bat. The Shangao raised 1 finger. Your first question isn't worth much, and Daddy doesn't swindle people. How about this? We can make a trade, and I'll tell you his whereabouts. What do you want to trade? The Shangao licked his thick and greasy lips. Daddy likes to dine on human suffering. The more painful the past, the better it tastes. Oh my God. He glanced maliciously at the 4. If you're willing to stand right here and let me take some painful secrets to nourish myself with, then I'll answer your first question. Since this matter involved the others, Mu Zhongchuyi turned to look at them instead of immediately accepting. The Shangao could answer 3 of their questions. Morsi thought they absolutely shouldn't give him everything he wanted on the first one. Otherwise, what would they have to barter with the second and third? But before he could say so, Gu Mang spoke up. Pixyong, aren't you being a bit unfair? The Shangao widened his eyes. How so? Look, Gu Mang said. We've only asked you 1 question, but you want to take painful memories from each of us. You're acting really greedy. The Shangao disagreed. How's Daddy being greedy? You just said you're making a trade with us. 1 thing should be offered in exchange for another, so for each question we ask, you should only get to absorb 1 person's memories. Isn't that right? The Shangao was silent. So for each question you answer, you can choose the memories from 1 person, not all 4 of us. Gu Mang continued. You're an ancient deity. Shouldn't you be more generous and stick to your word? You... The Shangao choked on his anger, his piggish face flushing red and purple. This was his honor at risk. Although he wanted to expel these foreigners as quick as possible, he could sense that the 4 individuals present were all victims of suffering. Their anguish was sure to taste mellow and rich, a delicacy beyond compare. Why should one let go of ducks that had waddled into one's mouth? The Shangao roared. All right. 1 question for 1 taste of suffering. But it's not for you to volunteer yourselves. Daddy will pick among you. Gu Mang mimicked his tone and echoed cheerfully. All right. If you want to pick, then step right up. Come now. Do you want lame legs, dead face, missy, or blue eyes? The Shangao sized them all up with care, his piggy nose sniffing out the bitterness in the depths of their souls. The more he scented, the greedier he became. Gu Mang was born a slave and was short 2 souls. Morsi's father had died early. His mother had betrayed him, and he'd been stabbed by someone he loved dearly. Mu Zhongchuyi was abandoned by both parents in his youth and became an orphan. As for Jiang Yeshui, no words were necessary. He led a life of eternal loneliness. The Shangao swallowed hungrily. He wanted to go back on his words and gobble down all of their memories at once. But just as trees needed bark, people needed to maintain face. Even the Shangao had his self-respect. These humans smelled exceptionally delicious, but he hadn't lost all self-control. He cleared his throat and made a decision. It'll be you. Yes, you. The damn cripple. You come up. Jiang Yeshui smiled lightly. Why is that? Is it that Zhanxing thinks I've endured the most suffering? You're maimed. You're the one. Are you unwilling? What wouldn't I do to save Zhanxing? Jiang Yeshui said. But Zhanxing wants to eat secrets. Naturally, there are things I don't want anyone else to know. I can provide painful memories for you to absorb, but you must not let them out. Zhanxing, will you accept this? When memories enter my mouth, they become my food, said the Shangao. Why would I ever spit them out? Don't worry. Daddy absolutely won't let them out. Jiang Yeshui was amiable, but far from stupid. Words are empty. Will Zhanxing swear a demonic oath? The Shangao was once a pig, after all. He was extremely greedy. He was merely in a hurry to swallow the suffering of others and had no interest in broadcasting the secrets he absorbed. Without hesitation, the Shangao raised 2 fingers to swear a demonic oath. Can we get on with it? Damn cripple, such a pain in the ass. Jiang Yeshui smiled warmly. Then I invite you to collect your dues. Gu Mang and Morsi had no objections, so the Shangao, standing in the middle of the blood pool, raised his head and opened his mouth. It emitted a whistling hiss. Wind whipped up around them, and dense wisps of black smoke soared out from Jiang Yeshue's chest. Everything rushed into the Shangao's stomach. When the gale subsided, the Shangao opened his eyes wide. He licked his lips, far from sated. Oh, not bad. Very tasty. You're just a damn cripple. I can't believe your painful memories actually involve... Jiang Yeshue cut the Shangao off with a smile. Xiansheng, did you forget your promise? The Shangao fell silent. But for some reason, once he finished chewing on Jiang Yeshue's suffering, he peered over at Muzhong Chuyi, his shiny little eyes dancing with malice. Muzhong Chuyi swept his sleeves back. You've already received our payment. Now speak. Where is your Zhanxing? Chapter 80. Time Mirror. Him? The Shangao snorted through his pig's snout. As of now, he's locked in the 4th dark room at the top of this tower. There are 2 high-level bat demons guarding it and 12 ancient blood-sucking vines on him. If the 4 of you are going to try rescuing him alone, you'll have a bad time. Muzhong Chuyi scoffed. It's just 2 monsters and 12 chains. What's there to fear? With a wave of his hand, the horsetail whisk in the crook of his arm lengthened into a gleaming silver longsword. Lightning crackled and hissed around the blade. Muzhong Chuyi pressed 2 fingers together and called, Zhao Xue, ride the wind. The longsword Zhao Xue flickered splendidly, brightening Muzhong Chuyi's face as it floated before him. Zhao Xue was slender and light, so Muzhong Chuyi used an unorthodox method to ride his sword. He didn't step on Zhao Xue. Rather, the blade transformed into glowing orbs of sword glare. The silver lights encircled Muzhong Chuyi like gently drifting snow as the concentrated sword chi helped him ride the winds. Seeing this, the Shangao's tiny eyes widened, from the size of red beans to soybeans. You're leaving? Aren't you going to ask the 2nd and 3rd questions? No need. The Shangao grew agitated. You don't want to know what taboo the little pig brain violated? Muzhong Chuyi's focus had turned entirely toward rescuing Yue Chunqing. I don't care anymore, he said bluntly. How could this be? The Shangao flew into a rage. How dare you? Wouldn't Daddy be taking a big loss? One person's painful memories aren't enough to fill the gaps in my teeth. No, none of you are allowed to leave. You better ask those questions. You need to stay and offer me 2 more sets of memories. Otherwise, Daddy definitely won't spare you. Xiansheng, how have you taken a loss? Jiang Yeshue patiently responded. We agreed on 3 questions at most, but we didn't promise to ask all 3. Since Chuyi feels that 1 answer is sufficient, then of course... He was only halfway through his thought when the Shangao brandished a massive hatchet and swung it down in uncontrolled fury. The blood pool's scarlet waters surged outward, spraying coppery waves in all directions. Jiang Yeshue was closest to the Shangao. Just as the blade was about to strike him, as Morsi was still summoning Tun Tian as a barrier, they heard a deafening explosion. A golden talisman paper hissing with spiritual energy landed before Jiang Yeshue and burst into a powerful protective barrier that deflected the force of the Shangao's hatchet strike. Morsi's eyes flew wide. Gumang. The one who had deployed the talisman was neither Jiang Yeshue nor Muzhong Chuyi. It was Gumang who had reacted fastest among the 4. The protective talisman glowed with a blinding brilliance, and Gumang stood against the light, his clothes whipping around him in the gales of spiritual energy. At that moment, it was not only Morsi, but also Jiang Yeshue who turned to stare at Gumang's figure in astonishment. They seemed to see the silhouette of that General Gu who had fought alongside them many years ago. Give me another chance. This time, I won't disappoint you. Gumang's beseeching words on Warrior Soul Mountain echoed in Morsi's ears. Morsi studied Gumang's figure as it melded with the golden light. The beating organ in his chest felt as if it were seized by a thorn-covered hand. It throbbed in bitter agony. At this time, Gumang really had been trying to draw closer to his former self, to draw closer to the Gumang who hadn't yet committed treason, to the General Gu who had shared in life and death with them. Pigxiong, if you want to eat painful memories, just say so. Why fight? With a wave of Gumang's sleeve, the golden barrier vanished. Come, you can have mine too. Will that satisfy you? Gumang took a few steps forward, planting his feet on the cracked stones beside the blood pool. He pointed to his own hand. Have at it. The Shangao's greed was like a snake that wanted to eat an elephant. He jabbed a finger at Moxi and at Muzhong Chuyi, who was still ringed by sword glares. What about them? I want theirs too. Gumang raised his eyebrows. I'm not the boss of them. Why don't you ask them yourself? The group was now on an isolated island in a tower filled with monsters. It would be better not to provoke them if they could help it. Muzhong Chuyi swept back his long sleeves, his expression wintry. If you want them, then take them. Hurry up. Afraid they would change their minds, the Shangao wasted no time and sucked in a great breath of air. He first absorbed wisps of rushing black smoke from Muzhong Chuyi's chest, swallowing them into his stomach. Then he seized upon the accumulated suffering within Moxi's heart. But the fretful fire in the Shangao's heart didn't dissipate after these servings of misery were consumed. Instead, he grew more insatiable. Because of his contract with the monster tribe, he had been stuck here guarding the tower for thousands of years. The previous Bat King ate people and took lives, so the Shangao had plenty of suffering to feast on in his wake. But this current Bat Queen was obsessed with leaving her monstrous body behind and ascending as an immortal. She'd gone a century without taking a human life. The only cultivator the Shangao had come into contact with all this time was Zhanxing, who had scampered over a few days ago. The carefree and laid-back Zhanxing, who lacked for nothing and was always in a good mood, contained no great bitterness or hatred. He was exceptionally uninteresting to the Shangao's palate. But today was different. As Moxi and Muzhong Chuyi's suffering entered his gullet, the Shangao was like a man on the verge of starvation, tasting savory, piping hot meat. He wasn't willing to let this meal go. But despite everything, the Shangao was still an ancient beast. He possessed some self-restraint. Hardening his resolve, the Shangao moved his piggy eyes away from the two turned toward Gumang. All right, delicious, he yelled coarsely. I'll eat yours last. Then Daddy will let you all go. Gumang smiled. Hiya. Then, I really must express my gratitude for your leniency and grace. His tone and mannerisms were uncomfortably close to the Gumang of the past. Truth be told, Moxi had recently felt that Gumang had been pressing closer and closer to the specter of the former Gushishong. As he watched Gumang smilingly negotiate with the Shangao, time seemed to have flowed backward. The Shangao was a simple-minded beast. He didn't hear the mockery in Gumang's words and thought he was earnestly being praised. He snorted and waved a haughty hand. Well, of course, Daddy's word is his bond. When have I ever backed out of a deal? He began to absorb Gumang's suffering. Black chi rushed out from the depths of Gumang's chest, transforming into a wide curl of black smoke that hung in midair before rushing into the Shangao's open mouth. The Shangao took a gulp, then suddenly closed his mouth. His eyes grew round as he stared at Gumang in disbelief, then flashed with a strange and avaricious brightness. Meeting those glinting eyes, Gumang had the feeling that this pig wanted to swallow him whole. He unconsciously took a step back. Bite off more than you can chew, he smiled tentatively. The Shangao huffed and puffed through his snout. Drool started running as he opened his mouth before he even spoke a word. How could this creature have imagined that a suffering equal to the accumulated grief of thousands would be contained within this young man, who looked to be barely over 30? But strangely enough, the Shangao couldn't explore all of his memories. He could feel the anguish there, but couldn't get at the true reasons behind the suffering. For the greedy pig, this was like scenting the aroma of a sumptuous feast that constantly remained at a distance. Unable to satiate himself, his stomach rumbled with hunger, all his other organs tensing in sympathy. You've lost many memories, the Shangao muttered. What a pity, what a pity. There's much pain there when even lost. If you were to remember them, that flavor would be... He sucked back a mouthful of drool, his eyes gleaming with a wicked light. Seeing the Shangao's expression grow sinister, Moxi felt a chill. Shuairen, come, he snapped. In the same moment, the Shangao tossed aside his previous proclamation about his word being his bond. He leapt from the blood pool, an evil beast pouncing on its prey. Face twisted and trailing spittle, he charged toward Gumang. "Watch out!" Moshi shouted. Tossing out a talisman, he enclosed Gumang within a barrier. A beam of fiery light crackled to life, illuminating the hall of the ancient tower. Shuaizhan arced into the air as Moshi raised the whip. He stood before the Shangao, his gaze ruthless. "Beast, your greed knows no bounds." The Shangao looked up, laughing maniacally. "Greed? So what?" His vicious scarlet eyes looked past Moshi and fixed upon Gumang standing behind him. The Shangao licked his lips. "I hadn't expected such a prize to be delivered to my doorstep. I was tricked by the Bat tribe, confined to this blood pool for thousands of years to guard the tower on behalf of the Bat Queen. If I can flash back your memories, exploit your suffering, and devour you piece by piece, then I, then I, then I would be free. I would be free." Moshi's heart juddered. Flashback his memories? What did that mean? Could it be that this beast could recover Gumang's memories? But how could that be? Gumang was missing 2 souls. This was no ordinary case of amnesia, so how? His mind was still racing when the Shangao flung out an arm. An explosion boomed. The blood pool churned, as if hidden dragons and colossal whales stirred beneath the surface. As the battle threatened to shake down the building, a bloody object as tall as 10 men rose from the depths of the pool. It broke the surface, waves of blood spreading out to batter the shore as if thousands of hydrangeas had scattered their petals upon the stones. A fall of scarlet droplets hit the earth, and the object became visible within the vermilion haze. Moshi was immediately stupefied, all the blood in his body seeming to freeze in an instant. The time mirror? When the blood dripped away, the mirror emerged, emitting a magnificent golden light. Its frame was carved with ancient talisman seals, and its surface reflected none of their figures, instead veiled in an opaque fog. Within it flashed the light of time and space, gleaming intermittently. It really was the time mirror. Moshi had only read of this mirror in the Academy's texts. It was linked to the 3 forbidden techniques: rebirth, the Zhanxing chess formation, and the time-space gate of life and death. Over the course of the boundless river of time, legends about the rebirth technique were numerous and widespread, with tales of the Zhanxing chess formation coming in close behind. Yet the space-time gate of life and death remained mysterious. According to legend, if one were to grasp this last forbidden technique, they could rip apart space and time, returning to the past and changing the future. But this technique had too many strange pitfalls, and the scrolls that told of it were not whole. Only fragments of texts were extant. Whether this technique had ever truly existed or was simply a story was impossible to determine. Furthermore, it was said that any who tried to use the space-time gate of life and death would meet brutal, sudden, and grisly ends. Thus, other than madmen with intense obsessions, no one would pursue this particular forbidden technique. But the time mirror was different. Many ancient records across the 9 provinces made mention of this legendary object. According to myth, the exalted god Fu Xi had left it behind when he created the space-time gate of life and death. Its function was similar to the gate in that it could transport someone to the past, but the mirror was just a prototype. Although it could construct an illusion of the past, it was impossible to actually change anything within it. Cultivators who entered the world of the mirror could make amends for past regrets, but their efforts had no effect beyond the world of the illusion. The instant the cultivator left the mirror world, any deviation from reality would be erased. The past in the mirror was like a dream. When the dreamer awoke, the world would be just as it was, perfectly unchanged. Thus, this time mirror bore a more fitting name, Mirror of Fleeting Dreams. All the past it contained amounted to no more than 3,000 dreams of golden Malay. Footnote 5. This is a metaphor for dreams that cannot come true, from Tang Dynasty writer Shun Jiji's story, The World Inside a Pillow. In the story, Lu Sheng takes a nap on a celadon porcelain pillow in an inn while the proprietor steams Malay cake. He dreams of a life of wealth and glory, but when he wakes, everything in his dream is gone and the Malay cake is not yet cooked, symbolizing the illusory and unattainable nature of dreams. Returning to the reading, and I'll read that again. Thus, the time mirror bore a more fitting name, Mirror of Fleeting Dreams. All the past it contained amounted to no more than 3,000 dreams of golden Malay. Zhang Yeshui and Muzhong Chuyi were Grand Master Artificers. They, of course, also knew of the time mirror. Even the usually calm and indifferent Muzhong Chuyi was ruffled. The time mirror is a treasure from the divine race. What is it doing here? I'm afraid it's not the full mirror, Zhang Yeshui remarked. Look at the left side. They followed his lead and peered at the left side of the mirror. Indeed, there were clear signs of breakage. This mirror, the height of 10 men, was just a fragment of the real time mirror. But even such a scrap was more than enough to leave them stunned. The Shangao roared, "Ha! Hatred indelible! Even breath the yellow springs! Array formation!" He pointed his giant hatchet, and the black smoke he had just inhaled from Gumang struck the mirror's surface. As the wisp of smoke entered the mirror, the dense fog within began to turn, surging like clouds blown by the winds of time. A blinding golden light burst forth. "Sufferer, fall within!" the Shangao howled. This call was like a soul summons. Those unconnected to these painful memories were entirely unaffected. Only Gumang cried out and fell to his knees, coughing up a great mouthful of blood. "Gumang!" Morsi called out, urgent. Gumang's limbs seemed to bound like a puppet on strings. He hooked his fingers into the cracks and gullies of the brick floor with such force that tendons and veins protruded from his arms. Yet some shapeless force pulled him inexorably toward the mirror of light. At the same time, the Shangao emitted several piercing and bizarre shrieks. Muzhong Chuyi looked around, his sharp brows furrowing. "Watch out!" The dark recesses of the tower suddenly glowed with flickering red light. From a distance, it looked like thousands of lanterns aglow in an endless night, or a splendid river of stars. However, this magnificent sight was nothing so elegant. It was the sign that the bat spirits perching at the corners of the tower had awakened. Lo, rustling cries swirled around them, growing gradually louder and more frequent until they crested like high waves on a stormy sea. Countless bat spirits flew toward them. Killing intent rose in Muzhong Chuyi's eyes. With a wave of his hand, he shouted, "Jiaoshui, destroy 1,000 mountains." The light of the longsword encircling him at once transformed into a billowing, snow-flecked wave of spiritual energy that crashed toward the approaching bat demons. With a deafening collision, the white spiritual tide broke against the black sea of bats, leaving in its wake a vicious tangle of blows. At the same time, the time mirror's pull on Gumang strengthened relentlessly. Gumang dove for the ground and wrapped his arms around the bone pillar next to him, but still couldn't resist the mirror's terrifying summons. Since time immemorial, entering this mirror was known to be a death sentence. Zhang Yeshui had been helping Muzhong Chuyi against the wild onslaught of bats, but as he turned and saw how poorly Gumang was faring, he moved to lend his aid. Before he could do so, Morsi Shuairen lashed out and bound Gumang tightly. "No need," Morsi said to Zhang Yeshui. "I'm here." With these words, Morsi yanked back the snake whip Shuairen and wrapped his arms around Gumang. The instant he did, he understood how fearsome the call of the time mirror was. No mortal body could withstand the invisible pull of a mirror of godly make for long. Holding Gumang, Morsi too was yanked bodily toward the mirror. "Moxiong! Guxiong!" Jiang Yeshui cried. It was an address Jiang Yeshui had used on their military expeditions together. But since he had lost the use of his legs, he could no longer take part in remote campaigns. Later yet, One of this group of comrades became Shihojuan, and another became Qingshu Elder. They had grown used to these polite and cold titles when they met. But in this moment of peril, the names that came to Jiang Yeshue's lips were those from their youth. The golden light grew brighter, its pull becoming stronger and stronger. They were about to be dragged into the mirror and into Gu Mang's excruciating past. It was a death sentence, a near certain death sentence. How many people had returned from this mirror unscathed? Although Gu Mang had no knowledge of this mirror, he had been thoroughly tempered by the Liao kingdom and possessed an animal intuition. As the two drew near its swirling surface, Gu Mang struggled in Morsi's arms. "Let go!" Morsi didn't make a sound. He commanded Shuaizhan to bind them together even tighter. Gu Mang looked up, his eyes glinting with an unusual brightness. "If you stay outside, you can help them," he snapped. "Let me go." Morsi gritted his teeth. "You'd better shut up." "Let go. You shouldn't come with me." "Shut up," Morsi roared, thoroughly enraged. The golden light grew so bright it blinded them. By now, even Shuaizhan anchoring them to the stone pillar couldn't resist the time mirror's power. The spiritual whip disintegrated into motes of red light, like rosy clouds dancing at sundown, and vanished back into Morsi's body. Without Shuaizhan's protection, the two skidded toward the time mirror. At almost the same time, the thousands of bats that had burst out of the darkness overwhelmed Muzhong Chuyi's holy weapon, Zhao Xue. Muzhong Chuyi pulled out a dagger, its snowy blade illuminating his determined phoenix eyes. He slashed open his own palm without hesitation, then raised his hand, sending drops of blood flying into the air. He was attracting those bloodthirsty bats with spirit-infused blood, using himself as bait. "Chuyi!" Jiang Yeshue couldn't help but cry out. Muzhong Chuyi sent a barrier crashing down, trapping himself within. His powerful spiritual blood drew the bats like a magnet. They swarmed to attack, surrounding the barrier. The entire barrier, and his snow-white figure within, was instantly engulfed. Only his harsh voice rang out. "Jiang Yeshue, stop that damn mirror! Hurry up! I can't hold them off for long." They were beset by troubles. Here was Muzhong Chuyi wildly besieged by vampire bats, his thin protective barrier about to shatter at any moment. There were Morsi and Gu Mang, dragged to the very brink of the time mirror's realm, both seconds away from falling into the ancient godly mirror. Jiang Yeshue's face was pale as paper, but Morsi cried angrily. "It's not that easy. Help Muzhong drive off the fire bats and the Shangao, then come back and try to do something about this mirror." With that final instruction, Morsi and Gu Mang could hold on no longer. A final violent tug hauled them into the time that billowed within the mirror's depths. The last thing Morsi saw before the mirror swallowed him was Jiang Yeshue steering his wooden wheelchair to Muzhong Chuyi's side and opening his Tianquan pouch. A dozen odd bamboo automatons fell to the ground and transformed into warriors armed with swords. Then he stumbled with Gu Mang into the abyss of time and space as his vision went dark. Chapter 81. Return to 8 years ago. Morsi opened his eyes. Dark blue-green curtains patterned with clouds hung above his head. The bed canopy fluttered gently in the wind, throwing dappling shadows across the hazy daylight coming in. He was momentarily at a loss. Where was he? Then he swiftly realized he and Gu Mang had been sucked into the time mirror. This was the past that the ancient godly artifact had conjured. Although they hadn't truly traveled through time, the world within the mirror was an exact replica of reality. Morsi should be able to converse with the people of the past and even alter the course of events. So in that sense, there was a little difference between truth and illusion. Moreover, this must be a part of the past that Gu Mang found extremely painful. The knowledge made Morsi's heart race. He sat bolt upright, his inky hair dark as black jade falling loose around his shoulders as he yanked back the canopy. He was in his own bedroom in Shihe Manor. Morsi looked around. The room's decor wasn't much different from his current one. The weapons rack was merely missing some blades, and a painting of Guangling peach blossoms still hung on the wall. He stepped over the sundial placed by the windowsill. It was of Yue manner make and glowed year-round with golden spiritual energy. With a tap of a finger, it showed the year and time of day. Morsi raised a hand and lightly pressed the sundial's glowing surface, and a small line of seal script appeared on the dial's face like ripples cascading outward. Morsi looked at the date displayed on the sundial. The organ within his ribs beat more and more ferociously, his face growing more and more ashen. As expected, it was that year. As expected, they had returned to that particular time. Morsi closed his eyes, his lashes fluttering. He swallowed. He would never forget the events of this year, the year when Gumang had been stripped of his power and his rank in the wake of his great defeat at Phoenix Cry Mountain. When Zhanxing had been beheaded, when the Wangbao army's surviving soldiers had been taken into custody. It was the year Gumang defected. And it was on this day that Morsi's pale, slender fingers stroked the spotless sundial, caressing the text flowing over its surface. The pain in his heart crushed him like clouds smothering the smoke. He could barely breathe. On this day, he had been appointed to the frontier and left the capital. Gumang at the time had already had his fill of misery and passed his days grinning and giggling in a brothel. Morsi's attempts to persuade him were of no use. He could only wait for time to heal Gumang's wounds. He had been so naive back then. He'd thought Gumang would pick himself up as he had in the past, that he'd persist through all the pain and suffering. He was so sure that such a day would come. But he had been wrong. Gumang didn't pull through. By the time Morsi completed his mission and returned to the capital, Gumang had already left Chonghua. A few months later, news came from the front lines that Gumang had committed treason and gone over to Liao. He never noticed Gumang's change of heart. He never got the chance to understand how Gumang had felt, to have a proper conversation with him. He never even got to say more than a few words to Gumang or ask him to stay one last time before he stepped into hell. But now, Morsi had returned to this particular year, to this particular day. He had returned to the period he had dreamed of countless times, to this moment that, perhaps, could reverse destiny. Despite knowing the time mirror couldn't actually change the past, Morsi's chest still burned as if scalded. He rushed out the door without even bothering about his appearance. The bright sunlight from 8 years ago shone fiercely onto his face, its piercing rays stinging his eyes, but he refused to close them. He fought back the urge to tear up as he gazed greedily at each plant and tree, each brick and stone. From around the corner came a quiet exclamation of shock, swiftly followed by, "This one greets my lord." Morsi turned, and his heart churned strangely again. Back then, Li Wei hadn't yet come into his employ. The one greeting him was a young servant girl named Shuang Qiu, whom ErHa Manor had taken in. A pitiable beggar whom Morsi had seen on the streets, whom he took into his estate because he could not bear to see her disgraced by malicious men. He found her to be clever and intelligent, and had once considered appointing her head housekeeper of ErHa Manor. Shortly after, however, he discovered that she was a spy sent by Muzhong Lian with orders to seduce and sabotage him. He had expelled her from his residence. Holding a water basin, Shuang Qiu bowed gracefully. "My lord woke up early from his nap today. I'll arrange for tea and snacks to be brought to you at once." Back then, Morsi had been sympathetic of her predicament and was extremely courteous to her. But with what he knew now, he only felt a deep disgust. He swept his sleeves back. "There's no need." "Does my lord not have an appetite? I brewed some refreshing plum wine a few days back, so if my lord is willing—" "I said there is no need," Morsi said stiffly. Shuang Qiu finally noticed that there was something odd about Morsi. She didn't dare press the issue, so she conceded and made obeisance. "Yes," she murmured softly. After a pause, she persevered. "But I was only acting out of care. I asked my lord not to blame me." Morsi found her rather irritating, but he wasn't a vindictive person, nor did he care to argue with a woman. Besides, he had more important things to do. "Prepare a set of military robes. I need to go out." "Does my lord mean to travel out of the city?" Morsi paused. "I mean to enter the palace." According to the remaining fragments of the ancient scrolls, those who entered the time mirror would return to their past self. Their appearance, features, and thoughts would all be reconstructed. Morsi likely only retained his memories because he had been pulled into the mirror at Gumong's side. He wasn't the target, but had entered by mistake. As for Gumong, he had probably made a full return to his past state. He would have no idea that he had come in from outside the mirror, to say nothing of what would happen later. Which meant that the person Morsi would encounter upon going into the city would be General Gu from back then, that Gu Shishong who had hit rock bottom and was in the direst of straits. Which meant he had a chance to talk to Gumong before he turned traitor. Morsi's hands began to tremble at the thought. His current self had traveled through time and was about to meet Gumong from 8 years ago. He could ask Gumong about so many things. He could get a clear look at Gumong's mental state before he defected. He could learn what kind of mood he was in and the details of what happened before he defected. He might even discover what, if anything, he could have done back then to prevent Gumong's treason. This kind of experiment was of no practical use. As soon as Jiang Yeshui rescued them from the mirror, any change he made would dissipate like smoke and clouds. Even so, Morsi could see himself on the cusp of receiving an answer to the questions, exhaustion, pain, and confusion that had plagued him for 8 years long. But before he could speak to Gumong, he needed to first visit the imperial palace.
Shihujun. This one salutes Shihujun.
As he entered the palace, the imperial guards lowered their heads and crossed their arms to perform obeisance. The scarlet pheasant feathers on their helmets rustled, and their armor reflected the dazzling morning sun. It was an incredibly peculiar feeling. Even though Morsi had much on his mind, he couldn't help taking note of some familiar faces. In 8 years, the soldier in the corner of the corridor would become a defense elder at the academy. The imperial guard standing to the right of the stone beast at the palace stairs was gifted to Wangshu Manor by the emperor and became Mu Zhonglian's personal guard. The youth with 7 beaded red tassels on his helmet eventually died rescuing civilians from a demonic inferno in Chonghua's capital. Morsi himself had bestowed the ribbon of heroes upon him in his coffin. There were also soldiers here whom Morsi had later picked to join the Northern Frontier Army. Whether they were destined to rise or fall, live or die, in the years to come, none knew their fates at this moment. Only Morsi walked among these living men of the past, as if strolling through a dream he'd had year after year. Seeing those faces, Morsi seemed to look upon lost souls from 8 years ago. So unreal and indistinct were they as he passed. Finally, he arrived at the imperial throne room. The newly ascended emperor reclined on dragon-embroidered pillows, his cheek pillowed in his hand as he closed his eyes in meditation. The beaded veil on the imperial crown swayed gently before his elegant features, fracturing the lines of his face and making his expression all the more inscrutable. Compared to his current self, the emperor of 8 years ago seemed a great deal thinner and surlier. It was little wonder, in the months after the late emperor passed, the nation had been unstable. The internal problems and external threats facing Chonghua were thorny and difficult to deal with. The irascible temper latent in the emperor's features had likewise been much closer to the surface back then.
This one greets your imperial majesty. Oh, Shihujun is here.
The emperor's eyelids fluttered open. His gaze was dark and cold as it alighted upon Morsi, who had come to stand before the throne. No matter how he tried to conceal it, that gaze betrayed a predatory air, containing vigilance, malice, and viciousness within its depths. As this ice-cold look pierced Morsi, he felt a sense of familiarity. It was a feeling that brought him anger as well as pain. Back then, the emperor always betrayed this kind of attitude when speaking to him, whether intentionally or not. It was only after Morsi swore the vow of calamity, making it impossible for him to betray Chonghua or the power atop the throne, that the emperor gradually relaxed his guard around him. But at this moment, the version of Morsi standing before the throne hadn't yet sworn this oath. When the emperor looked at Morsi, his eyes were those of a wild beast that had never been chained, like a ferocious wolf or tiger. 8 years ago, Morsi had been younger and his senses less keen. Facing the emperor with the insight he had now, the wariness in that gaze made him feel a chill.
Today, Shihajun should be setting out toward the fiefdom at the northern frontier to teach and learn magic,
the emperor drawled.
But you've come to the palace at this time to see us instead. Could it be that there's some issue?
Morsi performed in obedience.
Yes, there is an issue. I would like to defer my departure for the northern frontier by a few days. Oh?
The emperor narrowed his eyes.
Why? I'm feeling unwell.
No other excuse would work when dealing with this fox-like emperor. Only if Morsi said he was indisposed would his imperial majesty struggle to reject his request, especially considering the fact that Morsi never lied back then. He always spoke the truth and never begged illness when he was well, so his words were entirely trustworthy. As expected, the emperor was somewhat taken aback. After a moment, he sat up straight, eyeing Morsi from his high dais as he muttered.
Is that so? Is it severe? Why don't we select a skilled healer from Shundong Terrace and send them to Shiha Manor to examine you? It's exhaustion and excessive dreams, no more, along with some difficulty sleeping,
said Morsi.
I'll be better with a few days' rest. There's no need to trouble Shundong Terrace. I see.
The emperor looked thoughtfully at Morsi, then asked with feigned carelessness.
How long does Shihajun propose to postpone for?
Morsi had counted the days until Mang would leave the city to defect. It should be a week after he himself left the capital. He didn't want the same thing to happen this time, with him away.
10 days.
The emperor didn't immediately respond. Those eyes, like deep icy pools, silently watched Morsi's face. At length, he chuckled softly.
Shihajun's been on campaign for so many years. There have been many occasions where you didn't balk at donning your armor and heading back into battlefield after serious injury. How is it that you now want to postpone the assignment we've given you for 10 whole days on account of a touch of insomnia? This is rather too long.
Morsi didn't argue with him.
If I could push through it, I wouldn't have come to your imperial majesty to request a deferment. It's rare indeed for Shihajun to ask for rest after fighting so many battles. It would be unspeakably cruel of us to refuse.
The emperor toyed with the string of beads encircling his wrist, speaking slowly.
But as Shihajun is an important subject of Chonghua, the heavy responsibilities we place on your shoulders are naturally numerous. If you were to delay for 10 days to rest, we're afraid that later affairs would prove difficult to manage.
Well, that doesn't make me suspicious at all. He paused, smiling.
What do you think of a 3-day postponement?
Morsi fell silent. 3 days? Zhanxing was due to be beheaded at the Eastern Market in 3 days. Why was the emperor insisting on that day in particular? Mang was sure to have an extreme reaction to Zhanxing's death, yet the emperor wanted him to leave on that day.
I would implore your imperial majesty to grant an extension on a further 2 days,
said Morsi.
Will 5 days be acceptable? No, we can give you 3 days at most.
The emperor offered him another small smile.
Any more, and we would be hard-pressed to deal with the urgent matters afterward. Your imperial majesty.
Decision made, the emperor cut Morsi off.
Shihajun needn't continue. Since you're feeling unwell, go back to Shiha Manor and rest.
After a brief pause, he said meaningfully,
To combat insomnia and restlessness, one must soothe the mind. In the next few days, it would be best if Shihajun sees less of certain people who may make him frustrated or discontent.
Morsi gazed at the ruler sitting in his gilt throne. The emperor peered down through his swaying bead crown.
Does your imperial majesty mean Mang?
Morsi murmured. Chapter 82. The Emperor of 8 years ago. Morsi had cut right to the chase. The emperor didn't beat around the bush either. With a chuckle, he said,
As long as you take our meaning.
After a beat of silence, Morsi said,
Mang is a true friend of mine. Now that he's fallen from grace, would it not be bitterly disappointing were I to discard him? Of course. Loyalty is an admirable thing. It's not as if we are suggesting you never see each other again.
The emperor's slender fingers fiddled with the string of beads.
But he's a criminal now. Shouldn't Shihajun avoid associations that might create misunderstandings in such troubling times? Those in the right fear no assumptions. I owe him. What's improper about me persuading him a little? Besides, in Gumang's current state, were he left alone, I'm afraid he would... He would what?
Morsi gritted his teeth.
Develop thoughts of treason.
Back then, he hadn't known Gumang's intentions. He'd never suspected that Gumang could defect. But with the clarity of hindsight, he spoke now to remind the emperor not to push Gumang too far. The emperor's hands stilled. He smiled.
Is Shihajun so mistrustful of his own true friend? I only ask that your imperial majesty not leave him with no other choice. No other choice.
The emperor snorted audibly.
All of his choices were his to make because the late emperor deemed him an exception. Otherwise, what right would a slave-born man like him have to don armor, step onto the battlefield, and achieve success? You speak of us leaving him no other choice. Has he considered what kind of choices would be available to him if not for the late emperor's grace? Would he not be no more than Muzhonglian's dog?
Morsi said nothing. The emperor narrowed his eyes dangerously.
If Gumang has even a sliver of self-awareness, he should see that all of his former glory was bestowed upon him by the late emperor. Now that he's led an army to rout, we merely punish him in accordance with the law. What has he to complain about?
Morsi had come to the palace to ask the emperor to postpone his departure. He hadn't expected to trigger a conversation like this. This past version of the emperor was like a fox spirit who hadn't yet achieved human form. He couldn't effectively hide his motives from the Morsi of 8 years in the future, nor could he mask the great wariness in his eyes when he looked at Morsi.
What grievance could he have? What injustice could he feel? What right does he have to think of treason?
The cruelty in these words chilled Morsi's blood. He had never heard such sentiments direct from the emperor's mouth. As these words registered in his ears, he felt a drop of disappointment, even as a born noble. So how would Gumang have felt? Gumang, who had lost countless soldiers and seen his surviving forces taken into custody, who was denied gravestones when he asked, who had a brother about to be beheaded. Morsi suddenly understood. Back then, when Gumang had dragged him out drinking and cried out, deep in his cups, that he couldn't bear it anymore, that he was living a life worse than death, that wasn't drunken impulse. Gumang really had been broken. Chonghua had sent him onto the battlefield in their name, but not out of belief that Gumang and his ragtag army were safeguarding Chonghua. Rather, they considered this an act of grace. They, the powerful nobles, had bestowed this honor upon a slave. Hence, his defeat could not be forgiven. To the emperor, Gumang wasn't a devoted general who had suffered a momentary defeat, but a slave who had failed to carry out his master's orders after being rewarded. He had frittered away the trust his master had graciously conferred. Perhaps, upon realizing this, Gumang's heart had shattered. Perhaps it had broken into pieces from the inside out, crumbling to ash. It was only that back then, Morsi hadn't known. He had believed, so naively, in Gumang's apparently thoughtless laughter. He hadn't understood Gumang at all. Enduring the stabbing pain and trembling of his heart, Morsi swallowed thickly.
Your Imperial Majesty, you are not him,
he hoarsely said.
You don't know exactly how he thinks, nor where his limits lie. If there were to come a day when he really defected...
The emperor cut him off.
He doesn't dare.
Morsi held his tongue. How comical it was to stand in front of the emperor from 8 years ago and hear him say so self-assuredly that Gumang would never defect.
He doesn't dare to now, nor ever. Where does Shihajun imagine he could defect to? In the past, when Hua Po-an betrayed Chonghua and founded the Liao Kingdom, he had the following of slave soldiers. But what does Gumang have? What's left of his army has been detained and locked in prison. Why don't you tell us what you think he could do as just one man? Your Imperial Majesty thinks he couldn't leave Chonghua far behind as just one man?
The emperor bared his teeth as he scoffed.
If he really can't get over himself, then he might as well go.
Morsi was stunned.
He's of no use to us after his defeat at Phoenix Cry Mountain. If he wishes to defect for this, then he will become a scourge sooner or later if he remains in Chonghua.
The emperor stared into Morsi's gradually paling face.
Shihejun, do you think that persuading him or accompanying him is useful? If he intends to defect, it is because he wants too much.
An emperor's heart was the cruelest of all. He said coolly,
What he wants, we can't afford to give.
Morsi's blood froze in his veins, as if his body were covered in ice. His hands clenched into fists as he said in freezing tones,
Your Imperial Majesty, what he wants are only gravestones bearing his men's names, nothing more. Not just gravestones,
the emperor replied.
Shihejun, what he wants from us is acknowledgement of their status. My apologies. We can offer them lenience, but we can never give them glory.
Furious, Morsi snapped.
So then why is your Imperial Majesty set on sending me away in 3 days? That's the day of Zhanxing's execution. Does your Imperial Majesty desire to see if Gumang can remain loyal to Chonghua and its ruler after having yet another of his bones broken?
The emperor's expression darkened at once.
Shihejun, do not be impudent. He can't bear your Imperial Majesty's testing.
Morsi was beyond caring, nearly trembling as he spoke.
I swear this in front of the hall today. If your Imperial Majesty insists on this, Gumang will defect.
The emperor suddenly rose like a sword unsheathed. He slammed a palm down on the table.
What does it matter if he defects or not? He's nothing but a dog. If he bites the hand that fed him and moves against Chonghua, will our nation collapse? Will it dissolve? We will determine if this person is hiding treacherous intent, if he's cut from the same rebellion cloth as Hua Po-an.
The emperor was young indeed. Such naked rage was not something the current emperor would ever reveal.
3 days. 3 days from now, you will leave the capital.
The emperor's breathing gradually slowed, but his gaze remained hard as he stared into Morsi's face.
You are dismissed.
Morsi had never clashed so spectacularly with the emperor. This conversation flashed like the edge of a blade, stabbing at his heart. Silent, he gazed at the man on the throne. It was said that a ruler could see past falsehood, but when did this emperor ever let down his guard and ease off testing his own subjects, especially those of Gumang's class, who had ever been regarded separately from the nobles? As the saying went, those not of my clan are not of my heart. That was why the emperor was so wary of Gumang and so calculating, to the point that... Wait. Morsi's heart pounded as he recalled something else. Back then, Morsi had clearly known when Zhanxing's execution would be. Although he promised his Imperial Majesty to teach magic at the northern frontier, he had been sent to return before Zhanxing's beheading. In other words, if everything had gone according to plan, he absolutely would have had the opportunity to see Gumang one last time before he defected. What had happened? The more he thought, the colder he grew. There had been an incident on the northern frontier. Several monstrous beasts charged through the garrison, and he was forced to stay an extra few days quelling the invasion with the garrison troops. Back then, he had found it suspicious that so many monsters had descended upon them so suddenly, yet hadn't given it much thought later. But now, a hazy suspicion gave way to an even more horrifying idea. It was a thought that had never occurred to him before. Back then, had the emperor purposely sent him away to test Gumang? Morsi felt like a piece of ice had fallen into his chest, its insidious cold seeping into his bones. He was coming to a realization. His rushed departure, his delayed return. Had this all been deliberately orchestrated by the emperor? Perhaps the emperor had no intention of letting Gumang stay in Chonghua, which was why he wanted no one by Gumang's side during the days of his greatest pain and disappointment. This former slave general was no longer useful, and since the emperor couldn't find any suitable excuse to execute him, would it not be simply better to force him to defect? Could it be that the emperor had planned for Gumang's treason all along? Morsi was so cold he was numb with it. After taking leave of the imperial palace with its lofty eaves, Morsi worked for a long while to catch his breath so he could warm up a little. For a moment in the hall, he had yearned to recklessly ask the question, to kick up a fuss, but he understood that if he wanted to uncover more secrets, he had to let the normal course of events unfold. In this world within the mirror, he had one chance to unearth the truth. If he missed it, there wouldn't be another. Morsi raised his head, blinking his slightly reddened eyes and doing his utmost to calm himself and rein in his impulses. Only when he had gathered himself did he continue toward the Apricot Mansion brothel in the north of the city. He knew he would find Gumang there. Apricot Mansion was Gumang's favorite pleasure house, filled with splendidly attired women and the harmonious trills of the shang and the xiao. Gumang had once said with a smile how he adored the clever beauties there, that only their delicate charms could soothe the sea of suffering and hatred in his heart. Morsi stopped before the brothel, which fluttered with red silks. He looked up at its wooden signboard, gold text on a red field. 8 years ago, when he was leaving the capital, he had also passed by this building, fragrant with flowers, and stopped before it. But back then, he hadn't gone in. He couldn't endure Gumang's degenerate wasting, nor could he tolerate the sight of the man who had once shared his bed giggling amid a crowd of rouged and powdered women. The ache in his heart kept him from saying goodbye to Gumang before he left for the northern frontier. He missed his last chance to see Gumang before his defection. But this time, it would be different. This time, he wanted to have a sincere and genuine talk with Gumang, just as he had imagined countless times, just as he had dreamed of night after night. Morsi cleared his head, his nails sinking deep into his palms, and strode into the brothel filled with the chattering of women.
Ayo, Shihajun!
The madam started at the sight of him. Remembering the last time Morsi came to the brothel to hunt down a particular man, she blurted fearlessly.
What brings Shihajun here today?
Where's Gumang?
General Gu isn't here.
I know he's here, Morsi said. Which room is he in? The madam shivered as she met his knife-like gaze.
My apologies, General Gu,
she thought to herself.
This little shop is a shoestring business. We can't handle what Shihajun would put us through.
She pulled on a greasy grin and forced a laugh.
Shihajun, what is my memory these days? Yes, I recall now. General Gu is upstairs, 3rd floor. Turn left at the end of the corridor. It'll be the 3rd room. The boudoir of lingering fragrance. Shihajun, please go ahead.
Morsi turned toward the stairs without a backward glance. Before he even reached the door, Morsi could hear the fluid plucking of a pipa, as well as a singer's clear voice.
Our sons went forth with swords held brave, their blood and bones in distant grave. Last year this self was yet intact. Last night this body spoke and laughed. Your loyalty I safely keep, your valiant deeds I freely speak. For when these heroes' souls come home, throughout the land shall peace be known.
It was Chonghua's soul-calling song. The singer had clearly never performed such a weighty piece in a brothel. Though she sang without a single mistake, each faltering note betrayed her hesitation. A song used to console the dead played on a pipa like Song of Courtship. What a stark contrast in tone. Footnote number 6. Phoenix Seeking Phoenix, a famous love song written by Sima Xiangru for Zhuo Wenjun, with whom the latter eloped. Returning to the reading. Morsi walked over and stopped by the red lacquer door, which stood ajar. The singer played the final phrase, the last echoes of those delicate notes fading, followed by the peals of Gumang's lazy laughter. Such a soft sound, but it made Morsi's heart stutter in his chest.
Jeje's voice is as sweet as a yellow oriole. But there's a section you played too quickly. The tune lost its shape. It's my first time singing this,
the girl simpered.
I can't play it well. I've embarrassed myself in front of General Gu.
Gumang chuckled.
So what? In the vast country of Chonghua, you girls are the only ones willing to have fun with me these days and sing the soul song with me in secret. Come, I'll teach you how to play that part correctly. Jinnarugu, do you know how to play the pipa too? The fingering is too hard for me,
Gumang said.
but I can play other instruments.
The room was silent for a moment. Then Gumang casually said,
Fengbo, come.
Feng Bo. Morsi closed his eyes, his fingers suspended before the door, trembling. Suddenly, the bright notes of a suona sounded, shrill and comical. It was almost ridiculous, yet tears brimmed behind his lashes. This was the sound of the holy weapon Gumang later couldn't summon ever again, Feng Bo, its cry full of unsung regrets. Morsi felt a stubborn lump in his throat. He couldn't speak for a long beat, filled with the anxiety of a traveler who feared returning home as much as he yearned for it. In the end, he heaved a deep sigh and, enduring his dizziness, reached out to gently push open the red lacquer door. Sunlight poured in, and this dreamlike chiaroscuro, he saw Gumang from 8 years ago. Despite all Morsi had done to ready himself, the sight of this man felt like an unseen dagger tearing through his old scar. The agony spread from his heart to his limbs, a pain that made him tremble and go numb. He saw Gumang once more, clear-headed, black-eyed, wearing the robes of Chonghua, whole, healthy, not yet a traitor, bearing in his unbroken mind their shared memories. General Gu of the Empire, his Gu Shushong. Chapter 83, Gumang of 8 years ago. In the boudoir of lingering fragrance, smoke rose in spirals. The floor was covered in soft red carpets, and the 8-grid bamboo door to the balcony had been flung open, revealing the rich red lacquer of the engraved banister beyond. Below the balcony, a foxglove tree stood in full bloom, its branches wreathed in a smoky haze of pink and purple. His gushuxiong was perched atop the wooden railing, one knee bent, holding a suona the color of weathered copper. That suona gleamed with a muted patina, the white silk ribbon tied to its shaft fluttering gently in the evening breeze. The holy weapon Feng Bo. Surrounded by flowers, Gumang brought Feng Bo to his lips. After testing out a few notes, he closed his eyes and played a throaty tune.
Our sons went forth with swords held brave, their blood and bones in distant grave.
Gumang had always used to prefer jaunty little folk tunes, but the melodies he now drew from the suona were heart-rendingly sorrowful. Cheeks puffed and lashes trembling, he tilted his head backward in the fragmented sunlight streaming through the flowers and played his suona.
Last year this self was yet intact. Last night this body spoke and laughed.
The notes soared into the sky. Morsi said nothing. The world's bitterest olive seemed to be stuck in his throat. He stood at the door, gazing at Gumang's distant silhouette as if into a dream of a past lifetime. Hearing movement, the people girl turned in his direction. Her eyes widened, and she moved to kneel before Morsi waved a hand at her, indicating that she should remain quiet. Gumang was engrossed in his playing. The lips wrapped around the reed were red and wet, and his cheeks were endearingly puffed in concentration. As the setting sun fell on his handsome face, it gilded his black hair in rich gold. He sat crooked on the red railing, turning to soak in the sight of the drifting petals and luminous dusk as he played. By his hands, a silk ribbon tied around the suona swayed like a tide.
Your loyalty I safely keep. Your valiant deeds I freely speak.
Slender fingers pressed down on the mottled suona, dancing smoothly as the world's softest breeze.
For when these heroes' souls come home, throughout the land, peace shall be known.
Only when the song ended did Gumang slowly open his eyes, turning to smile.
Look, this way we didn't lose the melody, so...
Halfway through his explanation, he noticed the people girl's rigid and fearful expression. He turned and noticed Morsi, who had appeared at the door when he wasn't looking. His smile froze. After a beat of silence, Gumang amended his expression and adjusted his manner. He twirled the instrument in his slender fingers as he teased Morsi.
Shizun, how refined your tastes are today. Somehow, you're at this pleasure house as well.
Morsi heard a frighteningly hoarse voice. It was a moment before he recognized it as his own.
Get out,
he told the people girl.
At once. Hold it,
Gumang said. The girl fell still. Gumang smiled as he cocked his head.
How bossy, Shizun. How could you shoo away the girl I paid to spend the night with? Have you asked my permission? Gumang,
Morsi rasped. Emotion swept violently through his chest.
There are some things I want to discuss with you. Alone. What's there to discuss?
Gumang asked.
2 single men sharing a room is rather suspicious, don't you think? Especially since you're a rising star, and I'm doomed. What could we have to discuss? Gumang!
Gumang raised a hand to disperse Feng Bo, and the Suwana scattered into motes of glimmering light that merged back into his body. He leapt off the railing with his arms crossed, then looked down and chuckled.
Stop fussing, gorgeous. Now that you're on the up and up, and have caught Princess Meng's eye to boot, it would be terrible for your reputation to be seen in the company of an infamous libertine like me. We've been brothers for so many years, haven't we? Guga would feel bad.
The familiar cloying tone echoed in Morsi's ears. It wasn't a dream or an illusion. This was Gumang in the flesh, a man he could see and touch. The Gumang of 8 years ago, who was doing everything he could to distance himself from Morsi. To mock him, argue with him. Perhaps this grinning man had already made his plans to defect and leave quite soon. The realization birthed a violent impulse that pummeled Morsi in the chest. The rims of his eyes reddened.
I won't leave,
he said once more to the people girl.
Get out.
Gumang's eyebrows rose.
Did you not hear me? I've already bought her for the evening. If you chase her away, who will keep me company through the endless night ahead? I'll stay,
Morsi said. Gumang blinked at his dark eyes.
Do you know how to play pipa? I don't. Do you know how to sing me songs? I don't. Well then, why would I want you?
Gumang smiled.
You're hardly worth her price.
Morsi didn't bother arguing with him.
Gumang, I'm not going to the northern frontier today.
Gumang cocked his head again, a deathly infuriating smile lingering at the corners of his mouth.
How nice for you. But what does that have to do with me? It does have to do with you. Give me one more night. I have some things to say. If I don't say them now...
Morsi paused, looking squarely into Gumang's eyes.
I'm afraid I'll never get the chance to say them after.
Perhaps it was because he knew Gumang already intended to defect. When Morsi carefully observed the minute changes in Gumang's expression, he could see his features flicker slightly at this. Gumang lowered his lashes.
I have no interest in dealing with military affairs tonight. I only want to lose myself in beauty. If you really want to talk, there'll be plenty of time in the future. We can talk when you get back. I can't wait until then.
More silence. The people's songstress was caught in the middle, frozen like a wood carving or a clay figure, afraid to make a move or move a muscle. At length, Gumang lowered his head. His chuckle was like a long sigh.
Why are you still clinging to me? I no longer have anything left. I just want to talk.
Smiling, Gumang stabbed every cruel word deep into Morsi's heart.
What's there to talk about? Your sugar has nothing left to offer you. Please, princess. I just want to cheer myself up a bit. Have a little fun. You should leave. Let me go.
If Morsi had heard these words 8 years ago, he might have been deceived. He might have believed that Gumang was merely heartbroken and upset, that he'd make a full recovery after some time messing around. But the Morsi who stood before Gumang now had the knowledge of 8 years. To hear Gumang speak of fun only filled Morsi with an indescribable heartbreak and irony.
Just for one night,
Morsi rasped.
Save tonight for me.
Gu Mang sighed.
Don't make it sound so indecent. You have a long road to walk in the future. You need to guard your purity. Am I still pure?
There was a deafening silence. Even the Peeper Girl's head had jerked up in shock. She swiftly turned her bloodless face back to the ground, trembling delicately. Finally, Gu Mang laid down that detestable smile. He looked at the man standing before him, at Morsi's stubborn and furious expression, his gaze inscrutable.
Have you lost your mind?
He whispered.
You know exactly what I mean.
Gu Mang said nothing. Before he had been tempered in the Liao kingdom, Gu Mang had been wickedly sharp, seeming to possess a demonic sixth sense that told him precisely what his Morshirdi was thinking. But today, as he looked at the man before him, Gu Mang felt a sense of unfamiliarity. He couldn't read him at all. Gu Mang had wanted to make Morsi furious with him before he left. But now, as Morsi glared at him fiercely from across the room, Gu Mang found those sharp eyes filled with a mix of emotions he couldn't understand. There was heartbreak there, and dread, and hurt. Yes, he seemed to look hurt. Gu Mang observed this almost helplessly. The rims of Morsi's eyes were already red with unshed tears. Morsi clenched his jaw, eyes stinging. In a rough yet determined voice, he continued.
I've long lost any purity I had. I don't care about these things. You can't chase me away.
Gu Mang had no retort. He felt more and more helpless, more and more uneasy. In the end, he conceded. He couldn't change Morsi's mind. He sighed and turned to the Peeper Girl.
Miss Fei Tian, my apologies. There's a madman here. I must ask you to withdraw.
Miss Fei Tian finally heard the words she'd been waiting for. She excused herself and practically fled the boudoir of lingering fragrance. Only the two men remained in the richly appointed room perfumed with incense. Gu Mang came in from the balcony. He waved his hand to close the wooden doors, then turned into the room. A gentle flick of his fingertip lit the candle on the copper crane rack. Only then did he approach Morsi, coming dangerously close without the slightest hesitation, until mere inches remained between them. Gu Mang looked up, a question in his dark eyes and provocation in his gaze. Their breaths rose and fell in the space between them. He reached out to stroke the line of Morsi's elegant jaw.
Look at you,
he whispered.
Well done. You made such a fuss, even the girl I paid for left. Are you pleased with yourself?
Gu Mang sized him up as he would a brothel girl, scrutinizing Morsi's face. After a moment, his gaze slid down to Morsi's pale lips. He brushed his thumb over the softness of his mouth, caressing it.
Since you were so keen to rush over here and fight for my favor, I'll allow you to accompany me for one night.
Gu Mang murmured.
After tonight, princess, we'll keep to ourselves. No more of this.
He grabbed Morsi by the lapels and pulled him into a kiss. There came a muffled groan. Wet lips captured cool ones, and a clever tongue snuck into Morsi's mouth to dance like a butterfly tasting nectar, drinking in his breath, his scent. This same Gu Shishong who spoke with cruel indifference was always the one to make the first move when they kissed. He enjoyed it, caressing Morsi with those soft and glossy lips, seducing him with those dense lashes, passionately pressing his tightly muscled abdomen against Morsi's, almost as if he wanted to become one with him. But it was only ever almost, wasn't it? Gu Mang's forwardness was the cause. First, for Morsi's misunderstanding, then later, his intoxication. In the end, the largest part of what was left for Morsi was heartbreak. He remembered vividly their first union on the night he came of age. His heart had felt steeped in honey. He'd assumed Gu Mang loved him back. He'd assumed that from then on, he could lock his Shushong to his side with assurance and take him for himself. But in the light of day, Gu Mang had told him the events of that night were but a momentary impulse. After that, they shared many such momentary impulses. He drove Gu Mang into delirium so many times, melted him into soft spring waters until Gu Mang, in his tent, couldn't help but say that he liked him. Until Gu Mang, in his arms, couldn't help but say that he wanted this. until Gumang, in his stare, couldn't help but say that he loved him. But once the storms of passion cleared, Gumang would change, waving it all off as a moment of indulgence. So Morsi had managed to lay claim to his body again and again, taking for himself all of the softness hidden within the chitinous shell. But these repeated entanglements, impossibly intimate yet impossibly sorrowful, only left Morsi ever more lost and heartbroken. He waited for Gumang to believe him, hoped for Gumang to treat him with sincerity. But no matter how many times they lost themselves in each other, no matter what nonsense Gumang babbled as he shivered with passion, when day broke, never would Gumang acknowledge the feelings between them. Morsi couldn't understand this. He couldn't understand why Gumang would curl so close if he didn't love him back, why Gumang would tumble with him between the sheets if he didn't plan on spending a lifetime with him. He understood even less why Gumang could now embrace and kiss him so freely when he intended to defect. Clearly Gumang already wanted to leave. He already knew he would leave, that they would be torn apart by their loyalties and next meet with blades drawn. How could he be so calm and composed? Gumang abruptly hissed and pushed Morsi away, pressing his hand to his lip. He stared at Morsi in shock.
Were you born in the year of the dog? What are you biting me for?
The rims of Morsi's eyes were wet and red, his expression betraying shame and anger, hatred and sorrow. In the glow of the lamplight, he stared into Gumang's eyes. Only after several seconds did he brusquely ask,
"What do you take me for? You're the one who wanted to take Miss Feitien's place and keep me company."
Gumang paused. He had more to say, but the hurt on Morsi's face brought him up short. As he watched the young man standing before him, his chest heaving as he tried, yet failed to stay calm, Gumang's resolve suddenly wavered. Would Gumang really bet a man for no reason other than pleasure? He who was known as the beast of the altar, who commanded countless troops, would he willingly lie with a man 3 years his junior and allow himself to be fucked into delirium with no reservations? No. He hadn't made a carnal mistake because of silly impulse, nor did he repeat it just to chase a fleeting pleasure. In truth, Gumang had long since developed a fondness he barely recognized. From this rose the impulse, and from this, the pleasure. His heart had stopped belonging to himself long ago. It was just that he was unwilling to admit or accept it. Gumang looked into Morsi's reddened eyes and sighed. He lifted a hand, wanting to touch his young and handsome face.
"Oh, you. If I'm not here in the future."
Morsi's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't hold back any longer. He reached out and wrapped his arms around Gumang, hugging him so tightly, so forcefully, so deeply, as if he wanted to break Gumang apart and smuggle him into his bones, as if he wanted to use his own flesh to imprison Gumang's. Only then could he keep this man with him forever. Only thus could he prevent that future betrayal, that future confrontation, and that dagger in his heart. Gumang sighed in his arms.
"What's gotten into you today? I just want you to be well."
Morsi rested his chin on top of Gumang's head as he held him tight.
"If there's any sadness or grievance in your heart, won't you tell me?"
Morsi asked hoarsely.
"Could you let me share the burden? Could you not overthink it? Don't bear it all alone. Morsi."
Morsi cupped the back of Gumang's head with a large hand, folding him even more tightly, even more deeply into his embrace. The pain of regaining what was lost, only to soon lose what he'd regained, set every inch of him shaking, reawakened every piece of him. Morsi held this Gumang of 8 years past like he was embracing a wandering ghost that had finally come home. He closed his eyes, his straight brows drawing together as he murmured,
"Shizun, if there's anything on your mind, could you not hide it from me?"
The person in his arms stiffened slightly but remained silent. After a time, Gumang pushed him away. He pressed a hand to Morsi's chest, keeping them at arm's length. Those eyes, black as night, calmly met Morsi's.
"Shihajun,"
he asked lightly,
"what is it you think I've hidden from you?"
Chapter 84. Liu Zhanxing of 8 years ago. As Gumang asked this question, an indescribable apathy came over his face. His mischievous smile had disappeared, but the sharp viciousness within him was yet to be unsheathed. He looked at Morsi the way he'd look at a stranger. Of course, Morsi couldn't ask if he had thought of defecting. He closed his eyes and murmured,
I know you're still greatly disappointed with Chonghua and His Imperial Majesty. I don't.
Gumang raised a finger to Morsi's lips. He stared at Morsi, then broke into a grin, a touch of sweetness surfacing on his features, along with a profuse danger.
Sleeping around is one thing, gorgeous, but running my mouth is another entirely. Now that I've lost my rank, my remaining soldiers are imprisoned, and my brother is set to be executed at the Eastern Market in 3 days' time. Now you come to ask me whether I'm displeased with His Imperial Majesty? Do you want to saddle me with yet another sentence and see me even more helplessly damned? I've never wanted to do that to you. You don't want to now, but that doesn't mean you won't in the future. A beauty's favor always comes with danger, to say nothing of one as beautiful as you.
Gumang traced Morsi's lips with a finger, then down to his chin to tilt his face upward.
I can't help but be wary. Gumang.
Morsi looked at him through somber, sorrowful eyes as he said roughly,
My feelings for you are sincere. You nobles have gotten too used to doling out rewards. You give jewelry to please women and power to please men. When that no longer works, you decide to make a gift of your sincerity as well. How could I dare accept it?
Gumang sighed.
People's hearts are ever-changing. Even His Imperial Majesty was devoted to me once. Back when I was fighting to expand Chonghua's borders, I never imagined that the next ruler would treat me like this after taking the throne.
He paused.
I can't understand you people. Including me?
Another pause. The corners of Gumang's mouth deepened into a smile. He had an uncanny ability. When he was happy, the traces of his smile made others feel they were bathed in a warm spring breeze. But when he was upset, that spring breeze became a wintry rain. He patted Morsi's face.
Including you, darling.
Morsi grasped his fingers before he could move them away. Gumang looked up slowly, lashes fluttering.
Let go.
But Morsi didn't. He was undoubtedly hurt and despairing, but these emotions were like darkening storm clouds, lending his aura a deep stubbornness and shadow.
How would you like me to prove it?
Morsi tightened his grip on Gumang's fingers, light flickering unsteadily in his eyes.
Gumang, at this point, are you only willing to believe people of common birth like you? Would you listen if Liu Zhanxing were the one standing before you?
Gumang's expression didn't change.
Surely Shizun jests,
he said lightly.
I am no more than a lowly slave. You're all the ones who've never believed my words. When was it my choice to believe or not?
As Gumang studied him, it dawned on him that, right now, Gumang already wore the same expression as the traitorous general who had turned on his nation. In the depths of his eyes, his departure was a sure thing. He was like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to throw himself into the boundless dark below at a moment's notice. Morsi swallowed. It turned out that there had been many signs. He had just been too young to understand Gumang's true feelings, to the point that he'd missed all these hints that foretold the future. He closed his eyes and slowly released Gumang's hand.
I'm sorry,
he murmured.
Why are you apologizing to me for not being at your side the day you and your troops returned?
Gumang said nothing for a moment, then smiled.
You were still fighting on the front line at the time, so I understand. Anyway, what would you have done even if you'd been there? Could you have changed anything?
He sat down at the table covered with vibrant shoe-style embroidery and poured 2 cups of tea. Gumang's arms were still golden and firm with muscle, not bone-pale as they would later become. He pushed 1 cup toward Morsi and took a sip from the other.
Shizun, this punishment is the new emperor's idea. It's not something you could change by pleading on my behalf. I've never resented you for not being there that day. To be honest, our paths were never the same. Different people walk different paths, that's all. You don't owe me an apology. This apology isn't for you alone, Morsi said. Will you let me finish?
Gumang tossed him a careless smile.
Sure, go ahead. If it's not just for me, who else is it for? The 70,000 souls at Phoenix Cry Mountain.
Gumang fell silent.
I'm sorry, Gumang. Chonghua owes you 70,000 named graves.
The smile on Gumang's face faded. His lashes fluttered, then lowered as he sighed.
It's been so long since that happened, Morsi. I've already gotten over it. Why bring it up again?
Morsi looked at this man who spent his days in a brothel making songstresses play the soul song. This man who claimed to have gotten over it. After a few beats of silence, he said,
I will petition His Majesty for the gravestones you asked for.
Gumang had been toying with the cup in his hand, but his head shot up when he heard this. For some reason, a change came over his face.
Who asked you to meddle? I'm not meddling,
Morsi said. Gumang scowled, a look that gave every impression of a wary beast.
Listen up, Morsi. Even if my army's been disbanded, they're still men that I led. Dead or alive, they are my people, not yours. You have no right to act on my behalf. It's what they deserve. What each martyred hero is due. You were right to ask for them. If your plea goes unanswered, I will ask in your stead.
The room was silent, like they had sunk to depths of the sea. Gumang glared at Morsi, but he didn't utter a word. After a moment, he lowered his head and closed his eyes. For the first time since Morsi entered the room, he saw a crack in Gumang's cold mask, the sorrow behind it surging forth like a tide. Cast in shadow, Gumang hung his head and chuckled.
Shizun, you must be kidding. What martyred heroes? They were no more than ants.
Morsi made no reply.
How could ants be worthy of gravestones? Even if they were erected, it would be an awful joke. Who would make offerings to them? Who would honor them?
Gumang gripped the cup in his slender fingers. He stared at the tea inside, at the reflections on the surface.
Even if they were erected, they would be glorified heaps of rubble. I've long stopped demanding it.
Morsi watched him carefully.
There's no need for you to involve yourself. This is a matter for us lowborn. It's nothing to do with Shizun. Gumang.
There seemed to be something stuck in Morsi's throat. After a long interval, he asked,
What can I do so you stop being like this? You don't have to do anything at all.
Gumang set the cup back on the table.
Just be good and leave me alone. Time heals all things.
But time can't heal hatred. Time can't unpick the knot in your heart, nor can it stop you from staking it all and tossing yourself off the cliff. It will only wear you down into something unrecognizable, bleach your black eyes to blue, cover your body in scars, and grind your reputation into the mud. Time can only bring me your ruins. Gumang, I've come from the future. I've already seen how this ends. Each breath pained him like the twist of a knife. Morsi endured the agony, his nails sinking deep into his palm as he whispered.
What about after? After? What are you going to do after? What else can I do? Revel in the pleasures of the flesh.
Gumang said.
His Imperial Majesty stripped my rank, but he at least let me keep my money. From now on, I'll live however I please. It's not a bad deal. There's nothing else you want? Nothing at all.
Morsi parted his lips, but didn't speak. He wanted to recklessly blurt out, Stop lying to me. I know everything that happens in the next 8 years. I know what kind of doomed path you'll take if I leave you be. But he couldn't. The ancient books recorded that if a traveler in the time mirror were to reveal they had come from the future, they would be trapped there forever, unable to escape. Morsi wanted so very much to understand the truth of the past and what Gumang had been thinking then. He wanted to know what he could have done to stop Gumang from stepping into the darkness. How many weights pressing on Gumang's heart needed release? His Imperial Majesty's cruel words, Gumang's own despair. What else was there? Were there other burdens Morsi didn't know of, or that he had overlooked? In the warm, dimly lit room, Morsi stood beside Gumang from 8 years in the past, mind racing like a trapped beast. Weights on his heart. Were there any others he didn't know of? Realization dawned, striking cold into Morsi's heart. He suddenly recalled an old matter he had forgotten. Back then, when he had returned from the northern frontier and heard of Gumang's treason, he couldn't believe it. As if mad, he had questioned anyone who might know anything. Someone had told him this.
After you left, His Imperial Majesty summoned Gumang to the palace. He saw Gumang idling in such low spirits and thought it a shame to waste someone like him, that he could still be of use, so he gave Gumang a mission. Gumang accepted and left Chonghua, but he never returned to make his report.
Morsi had made relentless interrogations, trying to uncover what the emperor had asked of Gumang, but no one knew for sure.
I heard it was some minor matter, something about getting back on his feet, but Gumang didn't want to listen and left quite quickly. He didn't even stay in the hall for the time it takes a stick of incense to burn. It should have been a very small assignment, really.
In the end, the only answers he got were about how the emperor wanted Gumang to pull himself together, but Gumang turned a deaf ear. Morsi had taken note of this at the time, but as the years passed by, that detail gradually faded from his memory. Yet now, as he recalled it, his hands grew sweaty, fingers curling into fists. He had just witnessed for himself His Imperial Majesty's attitude. The emperor meant to test Gumang's loyalty. Why would he so solicitously ask after Gumang's welfare at a time like this? It couldn't possibly have been the real reason behind the mission. Morsi examined Gumang's face in the rosy candlelight. If Gumang hadn't yet decided to defect, then Zhanxing's death and the emperor's assignment could very well be the two things that finally pushed Gumang to jump into the abyss of vengeance. His heart galloped in his chest. The more he spoke with these people of the past and considered the course of events, the more he sensed strange clues everywhere. Something else must have happened back then. There must have been a piece he had missed. What was the last mission the emperor had given Gumang? The only stroke of luck was that time passed differently in the time mirror. 1 or 2 days in the mirror corresponded to a much briefer period on the outside. Muzhong Chuyi and Jiang Yeshui couldn't defeat the Shangao and rescue them that quickly. He still had time. He could investigate what happened 8 years ago. In the end, Morsi left the brothel. Despite how deeply he longed to talk with Gumang in his right mind, his rational judgment still won out. He stepped back into the street, seeking out a third person from the past. Within a cell in the deepest recesses of the imperial prison, a single oil lamp burned, its flame a dark blue glow. There was no other source of light. Zhanxing lay on the icy stone bed with one leg jauntily propped up, humming as he tossed a pair of dice he'd gotten from who knew where. He wore a set of loose, clean prisoner's robes, the snowy white lapels setting off his tanned and chiseled face. Possibly because his execution was at hand, or perhaps because he had a knack for making friends, the jailers hadn't abused him. The cell was furnished with a little table, on which a pot of wine had even been placed. By the look of it, it was likely the flower wine issued to all the jailers in Chonghua. The first person Morsi had needed to see when he entered the time mirror was the emperor, an inexperienced new ruler. The second person was Gumang, an old friend who hadn't yet lost his souls. The third person he had to see was Zhanxing, a dead man from his memories. Morsi stopped outside his cell and turned to the warden who led him there.
You may go. Yes, sir.
Zhanxing hadn't yet recognized Morsi's face. He thought the prison guard had gotten bored and come to chat with him, so he pulled himself up to a sloppy seat on the bed. He propped his cheek on one hand, tossing the pair of dice in the other.
Divination and fortune-telling, the journey of fate. The words of a man on his deathbed always strike true. Your Luca can part the veil of the heavens with just 2 dice, 20 silver cowries, and have your fortune read. Double if you're asking about your fated other half. Footnote number 7. Divination is pronounced Zhanxing, sounds similar to Lu Zhanxing's name, which is Zhanxing.
As Morsi entered his cell, he pulled back the hood of his black cape. Lu Zhanxing flicked his lazy glance up, only to freeze at the sight of Morsi's face. He missed the dice as they fell. They tumbled to the edge of the bed.
Shizun?
Morsi swept a glance over the dice and the wine on the table. After a pause, he said,
"This is the first time I've seen someone imprisoned in such conditions."
Lu Zhanxing lay back on the bed, limbs askew, and grinned. One hand groped for his fallen dice.
"Would you like your fortune told? This stall of mine is closing up for good in 3 days' time. You'd better not miss this chance."
Morsi sat down across from him.
"Why don't you read your own fortune?" "I already have."
Lu Zhanxing waggled his stinky feet.
"I, phony Prophet Lu, am a general whose successes cost 10,000 withered bones. But I can wither 10,000 bones even in failure. I've spent most of a year in this cell and have read my fortune hundreds of times. Nothing much to see there."
Footnote number 8 for 10,000 withered bones. This is a line from the poem 2 Poems in the Year 879 by Cao Song, which laments the countless soldiers that must have been sacrificed for a great general to be rewarded his accolades. Returning to the reading. Morsi raised a hand and cast a soundproof barrier in the cell.
"What are you doing?"
Lu Zhanxing asked.
"I've come to ask you a question."
As usual, Lu Zhanxing never took things seriously.
"About your fated match?" "About injustice."
Lu Zhanxing fiddled silently with the dice in his hands. Only after a long beat did he chuckle.
"How noble of you. Mang doesn't want to see you go, so I'm here to ask, Lu Zhanxing, is there some injustice regarding the battle at Phoenix Cry Mountain that you wish to make known?"
Lu Zhanxing tossed the dice onto the stone bed. Displeased with the result, he picked them up and tossed them again. Only after repeated tries did he finally roll a pair of 6s and stop. Looking up, he bared his teeth at Mang in a grin.
"Yes, His Imperial Majesty arrested me because I killed the envoy. I'll fucking take the blame for what I did. But because of my mistake, Chonghua punished Mang and 30,000 survivors. Why is that, if I may ask?"
There were not many people who could stir Morsi to anger with a few words, but Lu Zhanxing was one of them. What did he mean, take the blame? This impertinent man only understood instant gratification. He'd never cared for strategy or collaboration. He did as he pleased, and his last hot-headed impulse had sent Mang into impossible circumstances. Morsi gritted his teeth.
"Why couldn't you control yourself? Regardless of how improper or suspicious that envoy's actions were, did you have the right to execute him?"
Chapter 85. The Plan of 8 Years Ago. Lu Zhanxing smiled.
"What's done is done. I've already killed him. What else is there to say?" "Lu Zhanxing!"
Morsi snapped, dark brows drawing together in anger.
"Do you know what things are like on the outside?" "What are they like?" "After the defeat at Phoenix Cry Mountain, where your 70,000 comrades died in battle, the remaining 30,000 were taken into custody and await their sentence even now. The dead are without gravestones, and the living have no way forward. And Mang, all his achievements have been erased. His Imperial Majesty will never again use him for matters of importance. Almost everything he cares for has been destroyed, yet all you can say is, what's done is done?"
Lu Zhanxing listened in silence, though his rough fingers never stopped moving the dice. After a moment, his mouth split into a mocking grin.
"Isn't that a good thing? To never again be used by the Emperor for important matters?"
Morsi stared in shock. What did Lu Zhanxing mean? Lu Zhanxing and Mang had grown up together and were thus inseparable. But Morsi understood little about this brother of Mang's. Countless times he had seen Lu Zhanxing embrace Mang and ruffle his hair as the pair of them laughed uproariously. He saw, too, that Mang would regularly help Lu Zhanxing dress his wounds. It bothered him. No matter that it was proven again and again that Lu Zhanxing adored women and Mang harbored no feelings beyond friendship for him, still, Morsi was bothered. The sight of Lu Zhanxing made his skin crawl with irritation. Likewise, Lu Zhanxing had a poor impression of Mang. From his perspective, his childhood buddy had suddenly, for some inexplicable reason, gained an aristocratic young master as a bosom friend. Of course the intrusion displeased him. Plus, this little aristocrat constantly monopolized Mang's free time. Oh, he needed Mang to accompany him while patrolling or cultivating, and sometimes, when Lu Zhanxing was wounded, that rich young master would promptly also get hurt, forcing Mang to rush back and forth between them. The first time it happened could be chalked up to coincidence, but when it kept on happening, Lu Zhanxing began to suspect that the Moor brat was doing it on purpose. And so Lu Zhanxing's initial courtesy toward Morsi turned chilly. When the two crossed paths, they would pretend not to see each other. If Mang was watching, they would half-heartedly nod in greeting. Given this standoffish relationship of theirs, Morsi's understanding of Lu Zhanxing remained entirely superficial. Morsi had presumed Lu Zhanxing would at least feel regret or shame for the disaster he'd brought down on his brother's head. Never had he imagined that Lu Zhanxing would look as if he'd gotten exactly what he wanted. At the sight of Morsi's bloodless face, Lu Zhanxing stretched his limbs into a more comfortable sprawl and continued to toss his dice.
In any case, I'm a dead man walking. There's no harm in saying what I truly think.
Morsi gritted his teeth.
What other disgraceful last words do you have? They're not so disgraceful.
Lu Zhanxing snickered.
I think I've been awfully clever. It's just that I had to sacrifice a bit more than I should have. But I've more or less achieved my aim. What do you mean?
Baring his teeth like a wolf, Lu Zhanxing shot Morsi a glance designed to provoke. Eyes never moving from Morsi, he said,
Do you all think I killed that envoy because I felt him suspicious? That I was further enraged by my disrespect, so I beheaded him on impulse?
Morsi's lips parted.
Is that not so?
He asked softly. Lu Zhanxing swung one leg over the other and scoffed.
Shizun, do you think so little of me and Mangar?
He spoke lazily, his expression open and uninhibited.
Mangar and I grew up together. Do you think he would appoint me his deputy general were I really so stupid and reckless? He's a demon of war, not an idiot who lets his emotions call the shots.
The candle within the cell silently shed its waxen tears. Lu Zhanxing's words almost made Morsi tremble in fear.
You did it on purpose. I fought with him on so many battlefields for so many years. When have I ever done anything so irreversible on impulse?
Lu Zhanxing said casually.
Yes, I did it on purpose.
Air whipped through the cell as Morsi yanked Lu Zhanxing from the bed and shoved him against the stone wall. Two lamps guttered out and the cell sank into gloom. But Morsi's eyes seemed only brighter. In the darkness, they glimmered with flame, sparking with disbelieving wrath. His knuckles strained. He was on the verge of simply snapping Lu Zhanxing's neck.
Lu Zhanxing, are you fucking insane? Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined his life.
Lu Zhanxing's face flushed red in Morsi's grip. He looked down at Morsi with a single breath remaining in his lungs. Even so, he still plastered on a mocking smile onto his face.
Having me ruin his life is still better than seeing him ruin his own and the lives of others.
Lu Zhanxing ground each syllable between his teeth as a light flashed in his eyes.
Still better than letting him lead a flock of idiots driven by a dream doomed to fail, to risk their lives on behalf of you people.
Morsi was choking him so hard that vessels stood out on his forehead, but he still said contemptuously,
Risking their lives, like fools. His Imperial Majesty was right to strip him of his power.
Upon hearing that honest shout, Morsi dropped him as if bitten by a wild dog. He stood there, panting, hands shaking in fury. He felt cold all over. How many truths from 8 years ago were hidden in bloodshed and death? The instant Morsi let go, Zhanxing doubled over and coughed violently. Only after many great, gasping breaths did he turn his face up. Morsi's voice sounded hollow and empty.
You ruined him on purpose? Wrong.
Zhanxing licked his lips and rose slowly.
I saved him.
Morsi looked at him as if he'd heard the most absurd joke.
Saved him? Yes,
said Zhanxing.
How could a noble young master like yourself, born into the lap of luxury, understand our circumstances? Ever since the late emperor made an exception for Mang, started making use of him, he's fought countless battles without ever tasting defeat. But the higher he flies, the more inexplicable the criticism slung at him. I wonder, Shizun, if you've heard the things they say?
Morsi fell silent. He didn't know whence those slanderous rumors had originated, but they were like innumerable demons and monsters dancing wildly behind the curtain of night. How could Morsi not have heard them? When Mang had been only a minor officer, there were a few comments and jabs, but as he gained more valor and distinguished himself further, those cold and malicious words turned into a swarm of snakes, slipping from unknown tongues to wrap themselves inextricably around Mang's limbs.
He's just biding his time, hiding who he really is. Huh, beast of the altar, what real ability has he got? And you don't think his strategies and illusions feel a bit, dark? He's too opportunistic. I've heard he even dabbles in black magic spells of the Liao kingdom. He's a slave, after all, not a proper cultivator born of a noble house. Of course he'd have dishonest ambitions. If his imperial majesty keeps trusting him so, pardon my disrespect, ill will befall Chonghua sooner or later.
There were even those who directly compared Mang to that villain from the past.
He's just the next Huapo. The nation's inviting disaster upon itself.
Watching Morsi's expression, Zhanxing laughed, his slender lips curving.
It seems Shizun isn't totally deaf to it all.
Stepping over to the little table, Zhanxing sat down. He tossed the pair of dice onto the surface, then poured a measure of wine for himself and took an unhurried sip.
Mang has pretty much heard it all. It made me furious, but he would always say there was no need to take these words to heart. He would say that as long as we proved ourselves, these voices would falter by and by. More and more people would understand that not all slaves would be like Huapo. There were those like him, Mang, and me, Zhanxing.
Zhanxing smiled bitterly.
He's just naive. Or maybe not that he's naive. It's that he always sees the best in things. Despite living in the mud, he still insists on raising his head to look up into the boundless sunlight. Yes,
Morsi said softly.
He's always been like this. You probably understand why he's a god of war,
Zhanxing continued.
He's never faltered. No matter how difficult the battle, he always made it seem like it was no big deal. He had an endless, inexhaustible passion. More than enough.
He sneered.
More than enough for the leech that is Chonghua to suck from him till bloated.
It was a cruel thing to say.
That's what you think.
Morsi fixed Zhanxing with an icy glare.
That's why he's the war god, and not you. He's the one who wanted to take new territory. He's the one who wanted to prove himself.
Zhanxing smiled grimly, but said nothing.
Not everyone who steps on the battlefield imagines that their blood is being drained,
Morsi said.
Mang had his own ideals. He said he chose this path for himself with no regrets. No regrets. No regrets.
Zhanxing threw his head back and laughed. The chains on his wrists and ankles clanged as they swayed.
That's why I said he's stupid. Look at him. So many years of merits and honor. And what has he proved? Did those voices pecking at him stop? All he's done is make those old nobles fearful as they see a face that looked more and more like Hua An with each passing day. After so many years of him constantly proving himself, I've never seen anyone who hates him change their tune. I've only seen those who once tolerated him suspect him at every turn. Tell me, Shizun, what did he prove? Didn't he merely prove that he can mobilize troops just as well as Hua An?
Morsi couldn't contain his fury any longer.
Then what do you want? To prevent him from continuing on this stupid path by giving him no other choice but to follow in Hua An's footsteps in actuality?
Zhanxing slapped the table.
I just hoped he would stop.
Wine splashed over the rim of the cup, and the dice tumbled on the stained old table.
I just hoped he would stop,
Zhanxing repeated. These words seemed to have struck something tender in that coarse heart. His eyes lost focus, and his voice softened as he mumbled.
I just wanted him to wake up, to stop, to not be so naive.
Zhanxing closed his eyes. His face was flushed with emotion, but his voice had gone hoarse with the helplessness of despair.
It's been so many years. His future seemed so bright. You saw him taken off the slave registry. You saw his fame spread throughout the land as he was showered in praise. But when I look at him, I see him standing on an iceberg about to melt, surrounded by sharks waiting to tear him apart the instant he touches the water.
He looked up at Morsi.
Power threatens kings, not just for him. This goes for you too. Shizun, can you afford to have these words applied to you?
Morsi said nothing.
But he refused to take it seriously.
Zhanxing took up a white and red die again, slowly spinning it on the table.
You see, he's gone undefeated. His army's gone undefeated. No one could find a real reason to act against him. But he can't go a lifetime without defeat, and the consequences of defeat for him are destined to be more tragic than that of any other general with the power to pose a threat.
Morsi tensed. Without a shred of courtesy, Zhanxing said,
Because, from the beginning, he was no more than a dog you people picked off the streets.
If someone had dared to say these things to Morsi before he entered the time mirror, he would have roundly denied it. But he'd just heard the emperor himself speak those words.
Mang is nothing but a dog.
He had no way to refute what Zhanxing was saying. The more truths he uncovered, the more his heart ached, and the more his blood chilled. That fire in his chest seemed to be slowly guttered out. Zhanxing sighed.
The new emperor has recently ascended. Mangar hasn't angered him much. At this point, his defeat because of my actions only resulted in him being stripped of his power and dismissed from his position. His life isn't under threat. If he had continued to behave so recklessly, if he had suffered defeat at the pinnacle of power, he would have died mutilated and scorned.
Morsi's throat was raw.
So you did it on purpose? Yes.
Zhanxing smiled lightly and crossed his arms.
I have divine omniscience. I can see heaven's will. Yes, I made him lose on purpose. I wrecked his future on purpose. Reality has proven the accuracy of my guess. Look, sure enough, he has nothing left.
Morsi's fingertips were trembling. He stared into Zhanxing's face. Today he had finally gained some understanding of what kind of person Zhanxing was. A madman who risked it all. Morsi forced out each word from between his clenched teeth.
Zhanxing, don't you know 70,000 soldiers died because of you? Better than 700,000 to come. Don't you see that you destroyed Mang's life's work? Better than for him to end up drawn and quartered, tortured to death.
Wrathful fire gripped Morsi. His heart throbbed violently. Fingertips trembling, he grabbed Zhanxing and slapped him fiercely across the face. my God. My God, my God, my God. Yes, we are finally finished with the chapters, and I wasn't anticipating that I would read that many together, but okay, well, that is what I've done. What was that, 8 or 9 chapters? Oh my gosh, y'all. I don't even know where to start. And it's kind of too much for me to even talk about because I did such a long video. But I am going to attempt to express my thoughts on chapters 77 through 80 freaking 5. So, of course, we started out with Mang gaining another memory while he was asleep. And it was the continuation or the rest of Morsi's coming of age. And, you know, him not understanding sex and everything when he woke up and basically was like, all I know is that it felt good. It felt good for both of us. And you seemed happy. And I did not know that I could make you happy in this way. Well, first off, it was funny, obviously, because I kept laughing. But it was just interesting to see such an innocence and just like, I want to make you happy. Why didn't you tell me, bro? Like, I would have been doing this for you already, kind of thing. So anyway, also him expressing like, it was nice to feel needed, to feel something other than just malice that everyone's been giving me. And him trying to gauge Moshi's reaction, you know, by getting up and just kissing him was hilarious as well. So yeah, what was that? Two chapters that were really funny? Yeah, great. And then you know, then not funny anymore because we get them arriving on the Bat Island and everything goes to shit. Well, I'm going to say, I mean, everything doesn't go to shit. Everything goes to the past, which is shit. Okay, yeah, there we have it. So they finally arrive at the Bat Island, and there are these weird bats that are tall as humans, and some of them look really weird. But you know, they're half beast, half demon. Very weird looking things. Okay. One thing that I want to point out is, first off, there were a lot of cool artificing products in these chapters, from the ships that belong to Jiang Yeshui and Muzhong Chuyi to, you know, them having the ability to fly in the clouds, to the whatever thing Jiang Yeshui used that he produced to, like, this paper talisman sparrow thing that could receive orders and do as it was told. That was really cool as well. And even the time mirror is a cool thing. So it's just nice to see all the many cool devices in this world. Anyway, let me get back to the story. So yeah, we have all of them dipping their blood into the pool so that they can hopefully get up to the tower and go rescue Yue Chengqing. Meanwhile, we have this beast, the Shangao, that comes out the woodwork, is like, I want to feed off you guys' suffering before you can, you know, go up, essentially. And we know how that goes. He gets mad because they only asked one question instead of 3. And he pulls up this time mirror and just sucks in Gumong. But of course, there was no way that Moshi was going to let him go on his own. And so it sucks in Gumong and Moshi. Meanwhile, we don't know what's happening on the outside with Jiang Yeshui and Muzhong Chuyi. We just know that those bats are alive and awake. And they are thirsty for some blood. So anyway, you know, honestly, I think I'm going to reserve my thoughts on everything that happened in the time mirror until I can do like a video. Yeah, it's just because it was so much and I need to get my thoughts together. I also need to re-listen to all of these chapters because I am just like so hurt right now. There were so many devastating things that happened in these chapters. And I just need a moment to process them because, fuck, it hurts. And I'm just really emotional right now. And so I just need a moment to like review everything because I'm so hurt. My God. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to go. and take a breather, get this video uploaded for you guys, take a break, and just like deal with my feelings. Because I know I'm not just crying because of the story, but I'm just not in a good place right now. So I'm gonna go, and I'll see you guys later. And yeah, well, I mean.